my neighbor passed him. We had been passing him, leaving him alone, and he ended up getting killed by a neighbor. So
on a corn pile.
On a corn pile with a crossbow.
Yeah.
Anyways.
The tale of all this time. The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Deer Grow.
Man, it's almost food plot season, Jared, and Deer Grow is one of those products that has really changed the way that we plant food plots and the success we've seen from them.
No doubt. I've been, trying to plant food plots my entire whitetail hunting career, which is a little shorter than yours. But the minute that I started, or that I realized that I could get Deer Grow back into some of these remote plots where I couldn't get lime or fertilizer, especially in the 50-pound bag, format. Mm-hmm. So everything was changed. I could get into these spots moving forward with a backpack sprayer, and that's since escalated to these 40 or 60 gallon sprayers, and we're doing upwards of 5 to 10 acre food plots just with Deer Grow and having phenomenal success.
Yeah, and I mean, with the price of fertilizer, lime, diesel, everything this year, I mean, what better way to get in there and grow a successful food plot at about a third of the cost? Check out Deer Grow at deergrow.com. And we're back.
Hey,
on our podcast, episode 132. Nick is in South Carolina.
Did you make it down there?
I haven't
heard from him.
We're not very good parents.
Yeah, well, hopefully he made it down there all right. Was there a moving process? Or I don't think he owns very many.
He's like, I just packed a backpack.
He's like, basically got a knapsack like on a stick over his back.
Yeah, I think that was it. So he's gonna spend a few weeks down in South Carolina.
Take his car, or did his girlfriend drive down?
I don't know.
Nick, we hope you made it down there safe.
He's still on a bicycle.
Bark twice if you're in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I'm sure he made it. We'll check in with him today, now that we say that. It is June 8th.
June 8th.
So I don't know when this is airing, after June 8th, mid-June, but we have been in a massive drought.
Yeah. About to come to a close here, though.
About to come to a close.
Yeah, light at the end of the tunnel.
In fact, coincidentally, yesterday, I got 0.2 in Kentucky.
Attaboy.
Out of nowhere. We'll take it.
It's 0.2.
0.2 is 0.2.
That's real good.
Uh-huh.
That's real good. It's better than after a drought like that. You don't want it all at once.
No. So it should, we talked about it. I think we're both putting in beans this weekend.
Mine's tomorrow.
Friday,
yeah.
Yeah, I'll start tomorrow. I'll probably finish Saturday, and then Sunday, rain comes. It looks like all rain next week.
It looks real good.
So finally going to get that determined. But I mean, I saw something the other day was posted. I think it had been 17 days or something without measurable rain here in the Pittsburgh area.
Wow.
And that's second to only one other time when it was in 1870 something.
I was going to say, we don't typically get those droughts in May and June. It's typically shuts off August 1st.
September. Yeah.
Because we're not, the brass. Yeah, it's usually early August is when it shuts off, because then we start thinking EHD, and it's usually the brassica plots that we're
brassica comes up, then it dries out, and then it's geez. Yeah, but now it's been, and I mean, I feel for the farmers who, crop wise, typically they're banking on good rain in May to get their beans and their corn really into this thing.
I don't know, even for antler growth too, it's kind of concerning, because it's so much is happening right now, and it's just those plants don't have that moisture. It seems like we're like you said, our beans are not in the ground yet, and it's mid-June just about. Yeah. And it's dude, we're planting brassicas in a month and a half.
Well, when we talked about it, our my mineral licks are not getting used at all.
Mine either. Desolate. Except that picture I sent you this morning.
That was a good buck.
Decent. It's probably that 4-year-old.
That wine one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not getting many pictures at those, and it's because normally they're getting so much water through the water content of the plants they're eating that they end up, pissing a lot is what happens, and the salt comes out, and then they go to the minerals for the salt.
Yeah,
that's not happening because it's a drought.
It's funny how those things are kind of just like scrapes in terms of when you can expect them to hit it.
Mm-hmm.
It's right after the rain.
Dude,
especially if it's been dry, they pound them.
Next week they'll hammer them, I bet.
Yeah, good thing I have one camera. I literally I was like, oh, this thing has an active subscription on it, so I tossed it out.
Threw it out.
Why not?
Just bucks on it.
Yeah, I'm holding off pretty good here. I mean, we're just buried in work, so I mean, July 1st I think is the day. That's by then you can kind of start to tell what they're working with and maybe who's who, and
yeah.
So July 1st, I'll get most of mine out.
Not too far, man. So, but yeah, just dry, and I think adding into the, like, May is always a month that's just kind of like, from a hunting perspective, it's just blah.
Yeah.
You know, it's just there.
Agreed.
And
June has been that way too, with lack of rain or something about just like, just everything is just like, just dry. Nothing's happening. It's like,
no. And for most of the country, or at least the eastern part of the country, this week we're dealing with all the fire smoke from Canada coming down. It's been crazy.
Who's dealing with it?
We are. You've not paid attention to this at all?
We have fire smoke here?
You've not paid attention? You didn't realize, like, in Pittsburgh, it looked like orange yesterday?
No, I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah, like massive fires burned like almost 10 million acres in like Quebec and Ottawa.
Wow.
And that smoke has come down. Like New York City looked like...
I've noticed it's been hazy,
like
but I mean, not...
That's fire smoke. It's not haze.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's been crazy.
I was coughing a little bit last night. Now that you mention it, yeah, it seemed a little dry out.
A little dry out, yeah. So, yeah, that's been, until today, it's like supposed to finally blow out today. But yeah, New York was crazy, man. It was like, looked like Gotham City.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like majorly, like people were wearing like N95 masks again.
Yeah.
Walking around.
Yeah,
which
crazy.
Just don't walk around, I guess. But yeah, so I mean, you've got that, and I mean, again, that's Canada being super dry and like burning. Yeah, I had no idea. I was like, how big are these fires? We looked last night. It's like 10 million acres. It's like,
wow, 10 million acres.
If a third of Ohio was on fire, that's how big it is.
There's 10 million acres in a third of Ohio?
Yes. Ohio's like 28 million acres or something.
Wow, that's a lot of acres.
Yeah, yeah. So like, if a third of Ohio was on fire, that's how big the fire is.
Ohio's 28 million acres.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed anywhere close to that.
Yeah, I didn't know either. So I think it's actually like 9.3 or 9.5 that have been burning in Canada right now. But still, a third of Ohio.
Million acres.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A third of Ohio would be on fire.
Which
right
I
now.
guess, relatively speaking, is not that big, right? Canada's pretty big.
Yeah. Oh, in terms of Canada.
Is it a populated area in Canada?
No, I think it's like northern Ontario, northern Quebec and Ottawa.
Like, if not for the smoke, nobody would even know.
Probably. Yeah.
Like, what happened here?
Our guest might today, Ben may, because I assume that's playing a big havoc on like timber production and stuff. I mean, if you've got
Canada.
massive fire, yeah, because I mean, Canada's a pretty big timber producer.
Right.
So I would assume that, you're burning 9 million acres up there. That's probably not good for the timber business.
Yeah. Wow.
Leak there. Ben Rising is our guest today. You want to tell people about your tooth?
Yeah, let's get it out of the way. So you can see here, I'm missing a
teeth.
I don't know what that is. It's not an incisor, like a front, whatever. Lost my teeth in a $75 bone-in ribeye last night.
Can't eat the bone, man.
All four of these teeth are fake. They're caps.
That's from the
from a motocross accident when I was a teenager. And so I've got a root canal in that one, and it had a cap on it. And it's the last time I lost it was from biting a split shot. And it shattered. It was a couple of years ago.
I remember that.
So, yeah, it's funny that my first thought is when I lost it last night. First of all, was shit, and then I swallowed it. And then the second one was I have 2 podcasts tomorrow. I was like, which is whatever, and then I got a funeral I got to go to on Saturday, which is the least of the But it's like, man, I don't want to just be looking stupid, suit and a missing tooth,
I think the funnier part was we talked about if you were going to have to look for that cap in your poop today.
Yeah, well, if it would save me some money, I certainly would have. I've dropped one already since then. So
you're going to put the shit tooth back in your mouth?
That's what Margie said. I was like, yeah. I'll rinse it off, obviously.
Obviously. A little bit of soap. I mean, it'll be fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we got that out of the way. But, yeah, never a dull moment.
Yeah.
So, anyways, June 8th, and let's bring Ben Rising on.
All right.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Stealth Cam.
Dude, where would we be without our cell cams?
I would definitely be divorced at this point.
Yeah, I hear that.
I mean, the fact is I spent more time checking cameras than I actually did hunting prior to cell cameras. Now, at least, my wife can enjoy me being in the comfort of my own home, buried in my phone, checking those pictures.
Yeah, 100%. And dude, when it comes to trail cameras and definitely cell cameras, reliability is, I think, the number one thing that we're looking for. Stealth Cam just has a long reputation of reliable cameras, and ultimately that is the most important thing to us. They have to work.
In terms of reliability, There's not a better camera on the market than Stealth Cam, whether you're talking about the Fusion X, the Reactor, or the DS4K Transmit. And most of them are under $200.
Stealthcam.com. Check them out.
What's up, man?
Oh, not too much, guys. How are you all doing?
Oh, not bad after, having to deal with Jared's loss of tooth.
Here, Ben, I'm going to reach over. Can you see me?
Hey there, hillbilly.
I know, dude. It's amazing how ugly, or like how, one tooth, and it's like I'm a different person.
Really, what you should do is color one of them black.
Like to even it out.
It looks like you got Indian corn teeth.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
You just need like a permanent like gold grill to throw up over there.
Gold would be a nice
little
choice.
Protection.
You could go to that funeral and everybody would be like, dude, I knew you got a new job, but
You must have come into some money, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You just
podcasting stuff's tough.
I mean, Ben, you've seen Jared eat. He's an aggressive eater.
yeah.
I mean, it's not surprising that the tooth went.
Well, I'm telling you, I would admit, like, if it's like, I crunched down on something I shouldn't have, but I literally just chewing the steak. Like, it was pretty soft. I go medium rare. Wasn't
obviously.
Yeah, medium rare. Wasn't,
Yeah, we're going well done. Get out of here.
Chewy or anything. And yeah, I just came out and I felt it. It's just, you know how you feel something hard.
I just don't understand how you felt it, but then somehow you still swallowed it.
I know. It's weird. You know how you feel something hard in there that's like it's just not supposed to be there, like even if it's gristle or like bone in a fish or something.
Yeah.
And you feel it instantly, and you're like, ugh. And I spat it out, and I don't know, tooth was gone. Tooth was gone.
Jared's like a bulldog eating mayonnaise.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that implies. I've never heard that one before.
Oh, shit. Well, Ben, appreciate you coming on, man. It's, like Jared and I kind of talked about, and you're in the same boat there in Ohio. It's freaking dry, dude.
Oh, it's so dry. Yeah, it's, I can't ever remember it being this dry, this long, this time of year.
Yeah.
And it's really got things messed up across the whole Midwest because, like you guys were saying just a little bit earlier, from the farmers to, I just talked to my buddy in Illinois, and actually he farms my farm in Illinois, and just crying the blues, everything got sprouted, everything was coming up, and then boom.
Yeah, hammered.
Yeah.
We're at a standstill.
Ben,
and then the ultimate worry of VHD comes into play.
No doubt, especially this early. I mean, again, like Jared was saying, normally it's like, okay, August into September, we're worried about it. We obviously got rain coming, but if we stay dry, it's not going to be good.
Yeah, it affects everything. I feel it affects antler growth, just so many different things. So I don't know. We'll just have to see, but hopefully this rain coming can, at least, if we get it, they're saying we're going to get some rain, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, possibly here in Ohio. So.
Yeah, it's like 60%, which I've seen go to 0 before, but hopefully there's long enough stretch of it. It's at least a 3-4 day deal. We got to catch some of it.
Yeah. I think the big things that people have to look at, obviously we think about crops and food plot a lot, but from a native side, right? This drought is putting so much stress on that early good forage that typically is, super high in protein, easily digestible. It's not. It's fading fast.
And it'll affect acorn.
Absolutely. Yeah, the stress on all of everything we talk about from a native habitat side is gonna have an effect. It doesn't mean that these deer can't recover because obviously they're gonna put on most of their inches of antler here in June and July. But it's gonna take it's not like that rain's gonna hit and all this forage is gonna bounce back the next day. It's gonna take a week or two to suck up and really start to enhance that nutrition back into it.
One thing, you guys were talking about mineral licks, and one thing that the listeners can do that is a good thing this time of year, because when it is dry, the deer don't so much want that salt.
You're right.
And so a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take and dump water on my mineral licks, like buckets of water, or take a sprayer, keep them really damp, and keep that dirt soft, or the stumps, to where they're, and really like rotten wood this time of year. Like I really like my mineral licks to be on logs or stumps if I can.
Yeah.
But some areas you don't have that option. So if you got the right kind of dirt, but I try to keep that dirt as soft as I can.
Interesting.
What do you think that does, Ben?
Well, it just, do you want to lick? It's kind of like licking, do you want to go lick sand or do you want to go lick nice moist clay?
Yeah, sure.
And so I feel like they're still then, because I feel like it's ultra important for them to get the most out of the mineral this time of year if we're this dry.
Huh. Interesting.
I mean, I've seen that on the log side of things. Like
I do that. Do you put yours on a log?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know why necessarily. My thought process is always like, well, it's going to soak into the log and they'll just eat.
Well, I mean,
the
if
log,
you think about like
basically.
let's say a log that's rotting out, and I mean to a point, right? But there's a lot of moisture that's kept into that log itself, right? Versus it sitting on a rock or just on bare dry dirt or whatever, And so I think it does, soak up into that. And I mean, those deer will rip that thing apart, and I mean they'll eat that, in inner parts of that log that are soaked with moisture.
Yeah, I mean, they'll destroy it, but where I have to use a lot of logs like that is in some areas you get like that real gritty, nasty soil, but the deer don't like the mineral licks as good. Yeah. So if you put stumps or logs, they just utilize them way more better.
Yep.
Way more because they're not getting that gritty, sandy stuff in the teeth. Yeah. Yeah. At least that's feeling. I don't know.
No, I would agree with that. Yeah, it's such a weird, and again, I'm used to talking about this in August or early September or whatever. The fact that we're here in it was just May, and we're talking about drought and we
don't even have our summer stuff planted.
Yeah, our beans aren't in the ground and stuff. Yeah, because I mean we were going to, and then the water shut off, and that's well, now what? Clover is super stressed out.
I know. I'm a little worried to see mine.
Yeah, I mean, it's just most of that clover goes dormant in the summer at some point because it's just the heat and the stress. But it shouldn't have been in May, into early June.
Yeah. What do you think actually happens to you? You're talking about the native forage being stressed and those clover plots are in the ground already. You think that lack of moisture, it doesn't actually affect the nutrient quality. It's just the amount of forage that's there, right?
I mean, it does. So, as a plant matures, right, it becomes, in a lot of cases, less digestible, so the deer can't get the nutrients out of it. But typically, the one quality that you do see drop as that plant gets a little bit down the maturity line or it doesn't have that water content is crude protein. So you see it with soybeans. Soybeans have the highest crude protein early in their growth stage, right? The soybeans in August are much less in crude protein than they are in May and June, usually. Now, this year, I don't know how that's going to pan out. Yeah. But a lot of it is because of it, as it ages, and as it matures, you essentially have that crude protein level drop in it. Same with clover. The older clover gets or the harder it is to consume, some of those protein levels are dropping in that clover. So dried out clover right now is not nearly as full of crude protein as it was in April or early May when it was probably full and lush.
Interesting.
So it's not all nutrients, right? But I mean, certain key things when we talk about beans and clover and things, protein, that is
you speculating, or you know that for a fact?
No, it definitely drops.
Crude protein is reduced with lack of moisture.
Well, it's also just the way that plant is in its growth cycle. So even though it's early growth stages, that stress is going to drop those levels significantly.
Huh.
And I mean, that's why you don't want stress on your plants and anything early or crops even. But it does also, let's say it's a normal rain year, right? From the plants in May and June, even though they're still green in August, the crude protein levels are significantly lower in August.
That I get,
because of the maturity.
Cycle, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But the stress is also going to drop those out. So if you did a forage sample right now on clover versus early May when we had some rain, it's going to be dramatically different.
Yeah. Anyways, hey Ben, where's your farm at in Illinois? Roughly.
Yeah. I didn't hear you.
Which part of the state is your Illinois farm in?
I didn't hear you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of central.
Kind of central. Jeremy and I are looking at a piece out there
it's West Central.
Yeah, Wes.
Like, dude, I hate to be that way, but I cannot tell you the issues I've had. Like, it is just amazing to me.
Really?
Like, when people, it's just really sickening, truthfully. I mean, it's not like people can't find it. They just
Yeah,
do research.
but I mean, I hear what you're saying. I
mean, it's like, what do people really think? They think that just because they can get close to you, that they're gonna. I don't know what it is. Like, oh, I'm close to Mark Dury's farm, or
That's exactly what they think.
or Ben Rising or Lee's or whatever. It's like, or like, like somebody takes your lease after you kill a big buck.
Yeah,
dude, it's dead.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, they 100%, dude. If you have a big farm, right, and somebody buys against your farm, they 100% believe that they're going to capitalize on your hard work. Yeah. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Very well easily can, but what I'm saying is like, that's just not how I want to roll.
Yeah.
And like, I'm a nice guy to all my neighbors, whatever. And really most of the stuff, any of the stuff I have in Illinois or any of the states, I've been very strategic in what I'm buying or leasing or getting permission on. And I make sure that, like, what the neighbors are like already. And I have a really good relationship with all my neighbors anyways. So nobody can really even get close to me.
Yeah.
But it's just the fact that they think, even in general, if they can get into the same dang county, it can be, it's just going to change things, and it can, I guess, to a degree, but I've just never, like, I'm always just been one to, like, kind of go carve my own way or go a different direction, or, but basically it's kind of like north central Illinois.
Yeah.
Well,
dude, if I had to guess, it's probably not like you, well, and who knows, you can tell us here, but you probably just were, like, open to whatever opportunity came up in terms of, you're like, I want to be in Illinois, and I just.
Yeah. I mean, when I was looking when we finally decided to buy, me and my partner, Mark, it was like, we weren't like just dead set on any specific county.
Yeah.
I mean, we were open to any ideas from, obviously with buy price. We kind of had some, really good inclinations of where we wanted to be. And it did so work out that we could actually be in a county that we were very familiar with and had hunted with for years. Like, it was my most familiar county. So it worked out. But, since I've been out there, I've been hunting Illinois since 99.
Yeah.
A long time. And it's like, even the locals, like, since I finally started buying dirt, like where I do have dirt, the locals are absolutely amazed at what I know. And like the people I know, and it's like, yeah, but you don't understand. I've been hunting here,
right,
and coming out here for 20 some years. Like, it's not like I'm just some dumb city kid that you're a city boy that just come out here and bought a farm because I had money to throw away.
Well, and dude, that local knowledge in the neighborhood is ultimately probably so much more important than the county or the part of the state. Like, you can find big deer almost anywhere in Illinois. It's those local neighborhoods of, whatever. The neighbors have probably more of an impact on the local deer herd than the part of the state.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm like, I cannot even stress to you how blessed I am with the neighbors that I have. Like, literally, it's just been a godsend. Like, some of my neighbors are, like, literally like family. Like, seriously, like, they mow for me. They look after my stuff. It's just like being here at home. Like, having that, it's just like, just such good people. And you just can't always get that.
Right.
Like, for instance, I bought a 90 some acres in Kentucky, and it is completely opposite. Like, I have never had, and I've always said this for years, and I don't know what it is about Kentucky. I've never had more problems anywhere in my life than I've had in Kentucky.
Yeah.
People trespassing and doing things. Like, it is insane.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to the neighbors you have. Like, so far in Kentucky, I haven't had too many issues, but my Ohio place has been a bear.
Yeah.
And
that's how. And so, like, It really does. I mean, I guess it's just luck of the draw.
It is.
But, I've got obviously, my buddy that's in Kentucky,
Yep.
he doesn't have problems.
No.
But, and I know another guy that doesn't really have any problems too. I think it's just literally where things are set up, where they're at, what they're close to.
Yep.
And, it just depends. But yeah, as far as Illinois goes, and even in Missouri, we have a place out there, and I'm just so blessed with the neighbors that I have and truthfully, like, that is key, because if you don't have good neighbors and you don't have somebody that can somewhat kind of help you out, like, that is one thing I literally had to learn to let go.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like, I've always been a little bit of a control freak, especially when it comes to deer. And I had to learn that, look, Ben, you cannot have a regular job, a family, live 8 hours to 10 hours away, and get everything done yourself. It is never going to happen.
Yeah.
And to do it properly. So it's kind of been good for me in a sense, because I've kind of like let up on a few things and have let some people help me. And even like fans, truthfully, like, I've met some really good people through my social media channels and stuff, of people that are kind of in the same general area. They find out, and they become, they're really good guys, and they just truly genuinely want to help you out.
Yeah.
Like, there's still people like that.
It's fun. We've experienced that too, man. We have people reach out and like, oh, hey, I'm right by your farm down here, and that's probably been one of the biggest benefits of this podcast, is like just getting to know people in areas that we hunt. And
well, I mean, my neighbors on my Ohio place found us through this podcast, and they were like, hey, weird question, like, not sure, but the way you're talking about this, you might be my neighbor on this in this place. And those guys have been there for 20 years. So immediately I'm now tapped into 20 years of history in that area. And these guys are telling me things that I had no clue about, so yeah, there are great people still out there. And then there are also people that just are looking to take advantage of the situation.
Yeah. And that's true. I mean, you're going to get both. And I guess what I was trying to get at, it was luckily the relationships that I do have with the, what I so call my family neighbors out there. They're so, like, looking after my best interests that, like, people aren't going to get away with much. They might get away with a little bit, but they're going to get caught.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's funny, and I'll tell you this quick story, like, in like how this. So when we first bought the first farm, me and my buddy Mark, and it's such a crazy story, how it all worked out. And I don't know if you even want to hear it, but I could explain it. So like we had a 70 in Ohio, and we'd had it for a few years, and we'd originally bought it, me and Mark, to sell it. And, like, just as an investment, we'd hunt it a little bit and then maybe sell it. Well, we finally decided, like, we're going to look for something different. We weren't hunting it. It was a little farther south than where we had our home dirt. And in your own state, I find that it's harder to travel to hunt when you've got dirt close to home.
Yep.
So we decided we would sell it. And it just so happened a neighbor to the farm had just sold his business. He was retiring, and it just worked out perfect. And he bought it. He was glad. We were glad for him to get it, because it added to his piece he already had, and it was just great. We weren't into this whole let's bust it up, get every dollar we can, turn it into we were glad to make some money. We turned that into to start looking. So we had 1031 money. So, and we went to Illinois. We were looking around, and I finally found this one place, and Mark's like, Mark's kind of like, me and Mark have this special relationship. It's kind of like, Mark lets me kind of handle the land side of things, and because he's like, we just have this really good relationship in that sense. Mark handles the bankers, the business side of things. I handle this side of things.
Yep.
We kind of have different tasks. Works perfect.
Critical.
And so, we get out there. I find this piece. I basically, literally, we commit to it online. Not even ever seen it. I knew the area enough. I knew the aerial. I was looking at it. I'm like, I backdated my maps clear onto Google and looked clear back, and I watched the progression of the farm. And I could tell where timber had been cut, where it wasn't, things like that. And I'm like, this is in our roundhouse. This will work perfect. It was 160 acres. And so we committed to it, signed a purchase agreement, and we're going out to go look at it. We meet with the realtor. I get out there early one morning, drove 8 hours, got up at like 3 a.m, got out there. And I got there early and I walked the whole farm on my own. I didn't want to be around anybody. I just wanted to walk it. And when I got there, and this is no lie, like, and this is kind of a long story, but as soon as I got there, I pulled into the farm and I got out of my truck. And before I even stepped out of my truck completely, I stepped my foot on the ground and I just had this feeling come over me. And I was just like, I mean, it was emotional because I'd never really bought something like this. You know what I mean? And so I kneeled beside my truck and I just thanked God for the opportunity and was just like, just really am enamored at what you're allowing me to have and, what me and Mark have been able to do. And just, really appreciate it and thank you for this farm. And then I walked it and it was just even more than I could imagine. Like it was just mind blowing to me. I just couldn't get over it. I was so emotional. So I get back to the truck and about that time the realtor pulls in and he just had this look on his face and I'm like, this is weird, And then Mark pulls in and he's like, dude, I got some really, really bad news. And I'm like, what? And he's like, turns out there was some guys leasing this farm and they had in their contract with the landowner that they had first right of refusal if he ever sold it on and somebody agreed to a price, they could match it.
Jeez.
And I'm like, what? So like instantly it was like this huge kick in the sack. Just a giant letdown. And then I caught myself, and I went up to Brad and I was like, I put my hand on his shoulder and I looked at him straight in the face. Cause I was like, dude, I had too much of a feeling about this. And I put my hand on his shoulder and I was like, you know what, Brad? I was like, it's like this. I said, my God is bigger than these 4 guys from Chicago that want to take this from us now. They didn't want it before, but once they found out who was getting it, then they're like, okay, it's good enough, we'll take it. And I said, they didn't want it until they found out it was me. And I said, my God's bigger than 4 guys in Chicago. And I said, if I'm supposed to get it, I will get it. If I'm not, I won't. And Mark looked at me and he agreed. So at that point, the realtor's scrambling. He's like, well, let me show you some other stuff. And at that point, honestly, dude, and he showed us a great farm, like literally, that I just couldn't even look at. My heart was on the
You just
farm.
knew. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now I'll skip. So I say all that, and then it goes, and supposedly these guys are like, Ben, he goes, these guys are cash buyers. He's like, I just don't see this not happening. I was like, well, we'll see. 3 weeks goes by. He calls me. He's like, you still want that farm? And I was like, which one? And he's like, well, the one that you originally wanted. And I was like, well, of course. And he's like, they can't get the financing. I was like, I thought you said these guys were all business owners.
Yeah.
Supposedly. And I said, I thought you said they were going to pay cash. And he's like, dude, I don't know what's going on. He goes, but they cannot get the money. And I was like, what did I tell you, Brad? He's like, dude, I'll never forget it. He's like, that's all I keep thinking about is what you said. And I said, we're meant to have this farm. So we got it. So then, this is even crazier. So then there was 160 this used to be a 323 acre farm, all as one piece. Then the neighbor's farm was for sale at the same time, but they were asking a really high price at the time. It wouldn't sound high now after COVID prices, but this was right before COVID hit.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So this was like what, 2018, 19 when you bought this farm?
2019 is when
19.
we committed.
Wow.
Yep.
Nick of time.
And
Yeah.
so long story short, he's like, dude, the neighbor's farm, because then I kept looking at things and I told Mark, I said, Mark, we got to buy that farm too. I said, I know we really can't afford it. I said, but we cannot afford not to.
Is this the adjacent? Is this the adjacent 160 that was part of the original 320?
Yeah, and it was to the south.
Okay.
And it had the best access and had a building on it. And I said, but man, I said, Mark, literally, if the people can buy that, if somebody gets that bought, they could kill us. Like, they could suck every deer we're trying to into this back field. And And he's like, I agree. He's like, man, they want way too much for it. And the guy, I guess, was kind of difficult to deal with. And, you know, people had even made him offers within a $50 and of his asking price, and he never took it. It's been for sale for like 2 years.
Jeez.
Within $50 of his asking price, and they didn't take it? They would come up $50 to get it?
Yeah, within $50 an acre of his asking
An acre,
price.
okay.
He would never
Still.
take it. So, long story short,
About 300
I'm like, we go to the
$300
realtor, and we're like, hey, go to his realtor and make him this offer. And he just laughs at us. He's like, dude, there's no way he will take that. Like, it's impossible. Like, that is like $700 less an acre than he's even asking.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to understand my buddy Mark. Like, he is just like.
Oh, I met Mark.
Yeah. So Mark is like, I've learned so much from Mark in that sense of things. Like, he's like, you don't know until you ask.
Yeah.
He's like, the worst he can do is say no.
Yep.
And
I've heard him say worse.
And I'm like, I agree. I was like, well, what's it going to hurt?
Yeah.
So, and I was like, you know, I already feel like God's involved in this whole ordeal anyways. Like, we weren't really supposed to get this. We got it. Turns out the same guys that were trying to buy the piece we were trying to buy are now trying to buy that piece.
Mm-hmm.
So the realtor lady literally wouldn't even, she said, I'm not even going to make him that offer. And Brad's like, just try it, please. You know, our realtor. So she goes to him, makes the offer. She calls Brad back and she goes, I don't know what is going on and I can't figure this out, but he countered. And she goes, it's $500 less an acre than he's been asking for years. And he'll take it.
Yep.
Jeez.
And so we signed it. And it was like, it was crazy. And so at that point, we couldn't afford not to do it. And back then, and we got this great banker. His name's Zach. I mean, Zach's the best. And so, like, we got this great deal at like 3%.
Yeah.
For 15-year fixed with I mean, it's just like Mark and them work magic. And, dude, it's just like, it doesn't even pay to pay it off.
Yeah.
And Zach's from out there in Illinois, yeah?
Yeah, correct. And so, like, we just timed everything right. And then over COVID, the farm increased like $2,000 an acre.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, you just cranked your equity right into it.
Yeah. And yeah, it's just been it's been a real blessing. And just like, I don't know. And I tell that story to people about like, and I just say that like, you know, as far as like just speaking my faith, but it's just like, dude, like, just some of those things that I've seen happen like that, they just don't happen. Like there's a higher power involved, you know?
I think it's crazy when, you know, because Jared and I have looked at a lot of different properties and stuff, but there's certain ones that you step onto that you just know. And maybe like, I don't know, certain ones, like, I don't know why, like even that Ohio place I bought, it wasn't like I knew like, oh, I'm going to kill giant bucks here, but I just knew it was the property that I was looking for. Cause at that time I was looking for a hunting property and an investment property, you know, and obviously we're working on the timber side of this now, Ben, but like, it just, you know, it's going to pan out to be an awesome property that I bought.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
And it's just weird when you walk those, because there's other ones I've walked that I'm just like, yeah, like it's nice. It's just you don't have that feeling. It's when you step on a piece of ground and you immediately get that feeling.
It's like a peace about it, you know. If you can approach it from a if it happens, it happens, you know, type of a mindset, then the pressure is kind of off.
Yeah, it's off.
And if it is meant to happen, it will.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I think people get, I don't know if they get caught up in it or what, but you know, there's certain ones that, you know, even in today's with like higher interest rates and stuff, if you step on a piece of property and it's the one, you know, I wouldn't worry about 7% interest rate right now. I'd lock it up and then think about refinancing it 18 months from now.
Ben, have you stayed in touch with that banker?
Oh yeah, we're good buds, man. Like, I mean, yeah.
I may have you put us in touch with them if you're willing at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, as we're looking at stuff out
They're
there.
Great band. They've been great to work with. We've done other deals with them since, and literally they go out of their way. Obviously, it helped that we built equity into the farm and things,
Sure.
and then, you know, but some other things have come up that were unexpected, like I don't know why, but like that's just how things go sometimes. And like, bam, all of a sudden your neighboring farm comes up and you're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? You know, so then you get creative and you figure things out, and, you know, you might have to add another guy into your LLC or whatever. But dude, I'm just telling you, if you have the right people involved and you have the right mindset, you know, so then my buddy Dan, he came into this picture. And so we were able to put another piece together that touches this, and kind of building this block. And, you know, originally we were like, okay, we're going to buy some stuff to, you know, to start buying it, make it better, hunt it a few years, sell it, and turn it into, and basically end up with an end game farm type deal.
Yep.
Not trying to be like some land flipping business, but more or less trying to get to a goal. But I truly feel like the very first farm we bought was our end game farm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now we're like trying to find other deals that, okay, well, we could buy these, do things with them, and sell those to somebody at a good price, but give them a really good farm that's set up. And yet then we could take that income and invest it into our farm to help get our debt down. But I'm a land whore, and it hasn't happened yet. So
yeah. I was going to say, man, that seems to be the toughest thing, especially, you know, like thinking about, you know, when you buy a piece of land and you become attached to it, then the thought of selling it when maybe you don't need to sell it, that's a tough thing to go across.
Oh, dude, it's been the toughest thing for me because, like, I didn't grow up with land.
Yeah, exactly.
Owning my own land. I did not grow up with that. Never had that. And always had to rely on other people and, you know, get permission or work for it, but I respected everybody's land so much. And, you know, so much to the point where some of the ground I grew up on, people literally would say, like, well, that's Ben's woods. You know, we own the ground, they're his woods.
Yeah.
You know? But I treated those people with such respect, and because I knew how important it was. And my dad taught me that, thankfully. At least, you know, thankfully I had parents and family that taught me what that privilege was. And it wasn't something to be taken lightly.
Yeah.
And so long story short, like, to then start getting your own land and have partners and people involved that are allowing the doors to be opened to acquire a decent amount of ground. Like, I never thought we'd have this much land. And it's not because like we're all just rich. We've just been creative and we've figured out ways and we've really worked hard. And it's taken years, you know, like I never bought my first piece of dirt till I was like 39, 40 years old, as far as like a real piece of acreage, not my house and stuff, but you know, like a real piece of decent sized land. Yeah. And, you know, I have these young guys walk up to me that are in their mid 20s and I just can't see them. I'm like, dude, do you realize like it just takes time? Yeah. Like, don't get discouraged. Like, just be smart with what you're doing now, work hard, things will work out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a big piece of it. And I mean, I think the creative aspect of it it's super important, and it becomes tough when, you know, because people hear about investing in real estate and stuff, and the fact is that most of those things are dealing with, you know, renters or whatever, you know, apartment complexes and money. When you talk about land, you know, there's only a handful of things that can earn you income to pay for land, right? It's, you know, cash rent, it's CRP, it's timber, it's oil and gas. Like that's pretty much it. Like,
and some of them can more than pay for it,
for sure,
especially oil and gas. But to plan for that or have the foresight, it's not going to happen.
It's tough. Like in today, like in those areas where the oil and gas are good, you can't hardly buy a piece of dirt with the mineral rights.
Exactly.
That's where we're at.
Yeah, they don't
PA,
exist,
dude. I've had people say, "Hey, I only want to buy, you know, a piece if it has oil and gas rights," but it's like there's not any point in us even looking. You know, it's not going to happen.
It doesn't happen, and so it's same with the timber. Like, for instance, your piece of property in Ohio, Jeremy. Like, I mean, I've been in the timber business my whole life, and those deals only come along every so often. I mean, very, very seldom.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, for you to have landed that one like you did that's such a rarity.
Yeah.
You know, and luckily you had the wherewithal within your mind to know I better buy this. And you made an offer.
And not that good. I mean,
we're giving it too much credit here, Ben.
Enough that when I walked it, I was like,
those are oaks.
I was like, oh yeah, that's good oaks. And I sent probably you and Ben the same pictures as I'm walking that. But again, I had that feeling walking that. I'm like, I'm thinking in my mind, I can make this a good hunting place, right? This is a good farm for me. It sets up right. The cost is right. Everything's right. The fringe benefit, and we've talked about it a lot, is I look at timber as my security on an investment. If I'm looking at what I believe is good timber, I may not know the dollar value to it, but I know that there's value.
Or the market in that area, which is, we have the least knowledge on that.
Yeah, no idea. And so I'm just looking at that place saying, okay, it's got timber, it looks good, so there's security, and I think I can make it a good hunting place. That checked the boxes for me. That was good, right?
So here's the funny part. So like out in Illinois, they don't want to buy any kind of timber unless it's white oak or walnut. That's
what we were talking about. Yeah.
And it stinks because the farms, some of the farms we have just beautiful red oak on them and hard maple and stuff.
And they don't care at all.
And they don't want it.
Huh.
And it just stinks because it's like, I know what that would sell for back here.
Isn't that
and
crazy?
We could get some income back, and help get our debt down on those farms. And, the crop rent is good, but a lot of our farms aren't, the crop, they're not like 50-50 farms, they're more like, 20-80 farms, 20% tillable or usable compared to hunting parts, which is not the greatest. But dude, the buy per acre when we were buying compared to what things are now out there, and that's why we started going there, because the prices in Ohio were so insane.
Yeah.
In our area, to go out there and to look at something that was between 35 and $4 an acre felt like a Christmas present.
Yeah. That's I think that equity side of things is so important out of the gate. I mean, if you can visualize equity in that property, really within the next 5 years, let alone in your case, it was 2 or 3. I mean, that's a huge, that immediately makes it a good investment. And people have to understand when we're talking about this on this podcast, sure, we all want a banging hunting property. But again, we're not rich guys. So this is truly a big investment for our families, a giant investment.
Yeah.
Dude, it's stressful. I just wrote my check out the other day for my payment for the year, because we do one lump sum payment every year.
Yep.
And I went ahead and stroked that check, and I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm very thankful that I can do it. But It's a family effort. It's my wife and I, sacrificing and committing to it. And this is what we're going to do. She understands that these are investments.
Yeah.
And, that they're worth it in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
Because land is, she's a realtor. And so she understands, she gets it, and she knows. So it's but we both never thought that we would ever be looking at the kind of ground that we're attached to at this point in our life. But again, without the right partners too, it could have never happened.
Yeah.
So things have just kind of fell into place, and I just really feel like God has kind of had a hand in all of it, from the start. And it's just, I give him thanks about it, and I don't ever lose sight of that. And I just feel like that's very important. And, to young guys out there, dude, I can remember being, back in 2005, 6, 7, 8, whatever, running around with Mark Drury out there turkey hunting and things. And he was really just starting to get into buying land and putting things together at a bigger scale then. And, man, I used to just, in myself, I can remember in my own mind going, not so much jealous, but just I'm never going to be able to do this. This is never going to happen for me. And I mean, it's not to any kind of that scale that they're able to do it, but to even have what I have now, I never thought would happen. And I'm so thankful for it. And it can happen, dude. Let's just put your nose to the grindstone, be smart, surround yourself with good knowledge, listen to podcasts like this, learn from people that have done it, and ask questions. Because in one rule of thumb, and this was Mark's rule of thumb too, that he's made himself very successful in his own business, was if you can't buy the deal within a margin of where you feel it's at least 20%, 25% under market value, do not buy it. Because you have to have an exit strategy, if that makes sense. Unless you know something, or you know that land is going to increase in value that much more coming, then okay, we've made a few. Me and Dan have bought a few at a little bit topper end tier, but we know that they'll pay off eventually because of the type of deer and just what the market will do. But Mark's rule of thumb has always been kind of that 25%, and I'm talking Mark Leibarger here.
Yeah.
25% below market value, because you want to buy at a good price. Then you're instantly above, you're already above the game. And so everything we've bought has appraised for more than what we bought it for. And that's key.
Yeah. So Ben, on some of those new properties that you're doing, and not like prying into the financials, but are you guys leveraging the equity in your existing ones?
Well, we did for a 221 acre piece. That was it.
Yeah.
My partner, Dan, he had some, and I don't want to like try to get too personal for anybody's business, but Dan had some money to invest because he had sold some stuff. And so that kind of helped us get into some other pieces that normally we probably wouldn't have been able to, because we were able to leverage Dan's, what he had.
Yeah.
And so Dan and I structured a special kind of deal there to where, like, okay, this is how we'll work this, because you're putting up, most of the funds. I'll do this part of the deal. This will be my responsibility. And then in the end, when we sell, this is how we'll work everything out.
Cool.
So it's perfect for me. It works good for Dan. It's a great relationship. And so, like, again, there's always just different ways to skin a cat. And, but like me and Mark literally were able to add 221 acres to our original 323 for $0 because of the equity that
just
we amounted
it right over. Yeah.
I mean, dude, I love the group buying aspect. Like, not only does it like essentially double your money, your ability to what you can purchase, but also I've thought about this before. I'm like, Jeremy and I are looking at an 80 in Illinois, or multiple, 80s, or that kind of general size there. I'm like, dude, I wouldn't buy something like that by myself. I just wouldn't go out and use it as much. I mean, I would want to, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that you and I are looking at buying that piece together, not only allows us to, for it to be in our wheelhouse, but it's like, that's what the trips will be. It's like we can go out together.
From a strategy, a conversation.
Yeah. And dude, it requires a lot of coordination. Like, our partnership at this point is whatever, 8-10 years.
Yep.
And to your point earlier, Ben, is there's a lot of sacrifice involved in like not spending money in other areas so that we can afford a farm like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think that when you start to look at those kind of things, and I, it's crazy that we're at this point, but you look at buying those farms in 19, like I bought my first piece of ground coincidentally, again, not predicting the market, but bought my first place in Kentucky in 2019. And in, I think 2-3 years, it went up $45,000 or $46,000 in equity, and so I think when you start to look at these things, it's you can't anticipate what the market's going to do, right? So that's probably why Mark's looking at it and saying, hey, if I want to get in there at 25% less than what it is currently, because we don't know what
it depends what market you're talking about too, though, because somebody might have come to your farm that knew what they were looking at as far in timber and said, you're getting it for less than 25% less than market value.
Sure.
And another just standard realtor or whoever might have just not known that.
Yeah, had no idea.
Same is true for the recreational market, especially I think in the Midwest. Like, Ben, like you're saying, is the simple fact that you bought that farm and have hunted it and have killed big deer off of it is increasing the market value. I don't know if it's 25%, but it's something.
And that was our whole plan, was like, we were going to build a portfolio, and eventually I'm sure that farm will be for sale, and our plan is at some point when we decide, we don't know when it's going to be years from now, most likely, on that piece. But even some of these other ones, to be able to know, like, for people to know that somebody legitly like me went in there, killed deer, they're on video, you can prove it, you can see the trees, you can see the background, it's not fake, It's not like going around sprinkling sheds,
Yeah.
you know, to sell a piece of property. It's legit info,
Yeah.
portfolios on what you did, and
Documented on a TV show.
Yeah, and you hand that to a buyer, a special buyer that's like really looking for that farm. Okay,
Yes.
You get a premium dollar, and they know they're paying premium, but they also know that the proof is in the pudding. It's not like, I mean, the trail cam history that I will have acquired on these places.
Well, yeah,
by
exactly.
the time it's time to sell, will just literally in itself blow people's minds.
Well, I think that's a huge point, because a lot of the properties I've looked at in the Midwest, they're advertised as hunting properties. They're priced as hunting and recreational properties. You give me zero trail cam or any history of what's happened on that property. And it's like, how can you justify this being a hunting property and priced like these other top tier hunting properties, yet you've got zero history provided to show me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
and there's so much of that. And like, or you look at the trail cam pictures they do have. Well, why is the date cropped out? Oh, because it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Well, and that's
like, there's just so many of that little things that you have to kind of, you have to, what's the old saying? You got to sift through the crap to get to the point.
Yeah, that's it, man.
Well, dude, most of the properties that Jeremy and I are looking at, Ben, are like, yes, it'd be great if there was a recent trail cam history. It'd be great if they killed a 200-inch on it last year. But like, the price is always reflected. And you know, Jeremy and I aren't necessarily looking for a turnkey place. You know, we want something that people don't necessarily see the value. We're looking for a deal, right? And so if it's listed on some obscure realtor's website, or it's, you know, there is no trail cam history, if Jeremy and I can gather enough evidence from, you know, the pictures that do exist, or our knowledge of the area, or I think that's where you're going to find a deal.
So, Ben, I was
honestly, the first piece we bought had no trail cam history.
Yeah, nothing.
Otherwise, it would have been double the cost, right?
Well, I mean, the guy thought he knew, you know, that owned it, and he had leased it out, and he was trying to send us pictures of deer that had been killed on it, supposedly, but he owned other properties. And so, like, you really couldn't tell for sure, was that one really killed there?
Yeah.
Or, you know, they were nice deer, but I did enough talking to some people and found out some info, and to know that general neck of the woods was good. I knew the county was, I knew the general area was, but sometimes there's even specific pockets.
Yeah.
If you've got the wrong block or the wrong neighbors, man, you're wasting your money.
Yeah. I think that's a huge piece of
I
it.
wanted to know, was there outfitters against me? What was, you know, I wanted to know everything.
Yeah.
And and that's like one thing that Mark always says about me, Mark Leibarger. He's like, the funny thing is, he goes, when Ben gets into a spot or whatever, and because I'm a timber buyer, so this is part of my deal. But like, you open up my DeerCast maps and you look at everything I have marked, it'll blow your mind. But Mark's like, Ben will know every road, every landowner's name, and who owns what piece of ground within about 2 weeks, within 5 miles of here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, that's just how I roll. And I dig and I dig and I dig until I find everything out I can, and then we make a decision.
Can you share some advice with us about, like, so if you've identified a piece of property, like, let's stick with the one in Illinois, are you literally calling all of the neighbors, or?
I will. I'll stop and talk to them. I will. Yeah. I mean, I literally will dig every stone, because I'm telling you, like, I know a guy literally here just in Ohio. He bought a piece of ground, and I was like, dang, that seemed like a lot of money for that piece of land. But ground around here is just going crazy.
Yeah.
Like, it's stupid what it's bringing. And so he asked me if I'd go walk it with him. And I was like, yeah. So I went and I met him and I walked it. And he's like, what's your honest opinion? And I was like, well, I'll just be truthful. From what I know about the neighbors and stuff like right here, I'd never have bought this piece. And he hasn't owned it 2 months. And he's already got it up for sale because he's already had the issues.
Jeez.
It's just those kinds of things. You know, and I'm talking spent a lot of money, like almost $1 million.
Yeah.
Well, and you talked about it with me when we were off podcast, but we mentioned oil and gas being, such any of these areas that it's hot pockets, it's completely bound up, right? And we talked off podcast about the timber aspect. At one point you could buy a good farm and, maybe it wasn't the best hunting, but if it had superb timber, you got a great investment. Well, even that seems like, at least in Ohio, that's not very common anymore.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, the competition for timber in Ohio is insane. There's no place in the world that I've ever been that timber prices bring what they bring in Northeast Ohio, and starting to branch. Even the prices now are even creeping down to where you just bought your farm.
Well, yeah, because I mean, when I think we talked, like 2 years ago, you were like, yeah, that's decent timber. It's just far south, right? Which it is.
Yeah, dude,
right?
Seriously, like if I would have known when you first talked to me about it, and I don't know if like I was in funk or if I was chasing a deer or what, but like
probably it was, dude. It was November 7th. It was November 7th, 2021 when I was on that property. Yeah, so you were probably chasing a deer.
Yeah, that's probably the truth, because like literally, I was mind blown at the white oak.
Were you?
Yeah.
Well, we talked to Jed about it, and I was like, it was on, I don't know, off podcast or on podcast, and I was like,
well, you asked me, you said, I think there's decent timber. Can you call Jed and see if he wants to look at it? So I did, and he's like, yes, where's it at? And he's like, yeah, it's too far. Even afterwards, I told him what timber was on, and he's like, yeah, I wouldn't have gotten that far.
Yeah, and he was like...
Yeah, and I mean, and honestly, Jeremy, it is so far.
Yeah.
The trucking and the labor costs kill us.
Yeah. Oh, so I bet.
If that timber was sitting right up here in Coshocton or Muskingum County,
yeah,
it would bring another at least 25%.
Yeah. Yeah.
But where it's at, it is what it is, but it's still going to bring good money.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I went into it and I'm looking at, oh, that's good white oak, that's this, but they're 30-inch white oak on that place.
Dude, before I forget about it, Ben, can you talk to us a little bit about the timber market in Illinois? You said they're only looking at white oaks and
maybe even just in general. Like the variants, I think, that we're unfamiliar with is like, you mentioned there white oak and walnut, right? Well, why? Like, why wouldn't they have poplar value or red oak value?
Well,
the other oaks.
That is the export market. There's not a lot of sawmills in Illinois.
Gotcha. So they're exporting.
Yeah. So these guys can use the white oak and walnut. They can send them to export logs, sell the veneer, sell the saw logs off, export them to, or like different markets. And it's a lot easier for them. It's basically the cream of the crop. The woods gets high graded, all your junk's left. And,
Got it.
But that's what's happening a lot to a lot of these properties that are getting sold out there. They do a so-called, we went in and we did a timber management.
Yeah.
So you mean cutting all the white oak and walnut was timber management?
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah.
But leaving this ugly beech and these sycamores in this bottom and, this maple that's crowding out this nice group of young white oaks, that's not,
Yeah.
So, no, there's just no market for that. Well, and I get it. So I understand that. And the other thing that never happens out there is timber is never bought on the stump. It's
always
all percent. It's
really?
all on shares.
Wow.
Say that again.
It's all on shares. Like, the landowner and the logger have to come to an agreement like, I'll do it for 40-60 or 50-50 or whatever. And, to where here in Ohio, that still does happen some, but people know that selling your timber on a stump and taking bids that's how you get your most money.
Yeah.
What does that mean? I'm not quite following the difference.
Well, you're paid before your timber's cut.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
like how Jed does. And how Jeremy's doing his sale.
And that doesn't happen out there?
No, out there they shake hands, sign a contract. This is what we'll do it. We'll do it for 50-50 or whatever. Then they pull the logs out or send them to the export. And then when the checks come in, they divvy them up.
So you don't know when those logs are pulled off, you don't know what you're getting out there.
So is there no?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that like, my buddy Bobby Kendall, he's very fair with his landowners and does a great job with that. But still, when there's no upfront investment other than equipment and a chainsaw, dude.
Yeah.
Like if I'd have known what I know now, I would have moved to Illinois 20 years ago.
Yeah, from a timber standpoint.
Yeah, I'd be a gazillionaire.
Is there no bidding process in that?
Not really. I mean, it's just the market's that different.
Yeah, that's
You know?
crazy.
Like it's just that different out there to where there's 30 sawmills within an hour of me here in Ohio.
So that I was going to say that's the big difference, right? Is
sawmill.
that the sawmill
for the timber here is insane.
Yeah.
Like there's 12, 15 bids almost on every piece of timber anymore.
Well, Ben, with that in mind, do you think that let's use Ohio? Do you think that timber in Ohio, given you have the right person doing the management of it, is better managed than in Illinois because of the market availability?
130%.
Yeah.
130%. I mean, if it's marked right,
yeah,
or depending on what the landowner's goals, there's still a lot of diameter cuts that go on. But sometimes that's what the landowner, sometimes the woods needs that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it doesn't. It just depends. But, like I'm doing a job for a family right now, and it's a 16-inch DBH cut, but the woods hadn't been cut in years, and a lot of the select cutting hadn't been done in the past. And even if they'd have went in and just did certain trees, you either had to cut it super select or cut it hard, one of the two.
Yeah.
And they needed the money to achieve some things. So I said, look, if you really want your top dollar, this is how you do it. This is what you're going to get the most at doing. And don't worry about cutting it again in 10 and 15 years. Just get your money now and then let it do its thing. And when you're older, you could probably have another cut.
Yeah.
To where sometimes, like if you go in and you manage it correctly, you can cut every 5 years if you want.
Well, I was going to say,
10.
we talked about that on mine, right? I mean, if I wasn't cutting it necessarily for also deer hunting, you said that mine would have been a good example to manage long term.
Yeah, I mean, like our company would look into something like that. Our company, Tusca, would look into something like that to invest in it as timberland. Mm-hmm. And we would go in and probably say out of the 300,000 feet you're cutting, we'd probably cut 100.
Yeah. And then, but come back every 5 years for another cut.
Then come back maybe 8 years or watch the market, something pops up. Maybe we go in, pluck a few more loads out, just really capitalize on that market.
Yeah. So that's crazy.
Ben, how would you approach that? Like if you, and I don't know if it does, but if you bought a property in Illinois that had really good white oak and walnut, how would you approach that?
Well, I mean, it just depends on what your end game result is. Like, are you going to just buy the property to resell it? Are you buying the property onto it?
Let's say it's similar to your goal. So it's like, hey, we buy it with a 3 to 5 year plan. We'd like to timber it and resell it with,
with recreation,
more of a turnkey, whitetail.
I mean, my suggestion, truthfully, would be, yes, maybe go ahead and get some of the financial, get a little kickback in your pocket, cut some of the white oak, some of the walnut, but don't cut it all to the point to where the next guy in line has nothing to work with.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
Leave some meat on the bone so there's some actual attractiveness for him to be like,
yeah,
okay, I've got something here to work with myself even.
Yeah.
Like we bought a 160 in Illinois, and the guy, he had actually went in and he did do a harvest, and he took walnut and he took white oak out. But I was pretty dang impressed with how he did it. And he was smart enough. The guy's name was Justin that owned it, but he was smart enough to know that if he wiped it all out, it wasn't, for one, I think he cared enough about the land. He didn't want to do that.
Sure.
2, I think he knew that if he left a little meat on the bone, it would help him in the long run. 2, so I was really impressed that he actually did it that way. There's a ton of like 16, 15 to 17 inch walnut left on the place.
Yeah.
They took some hammers out, don't get me wrong.
Right.
They left a ton of really nice young walnut and stuff that we would have an opportunity to work with 10, 15 years from now if we still own it.
I think that's an easy piece for the resale, if that's in your mind. Like, think of it as just put yourself in that position. If you walk a place that's gutted, right? Even if it's been select cut and it's thicker in areas for recreation and deer hunting, if there is not a white oak left on that place or not a walnut left on the place, or even in our area, some red oaks, like you're not gonna feel warm and fuzzy about the timber you're investing in on that property.
Well, we just cut this woods to 12 inches, but it was for deer.
Yeah.
you know.
Well, that's how,
and
dude, that's been,
and they're wanting prime money per acre.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's because Jeremy and I have gone back and forth on it. Like I'm personally of the opinion that it's like, you know, you don't really need timber to kill giant deer on it, right? So like it's not taken away from the recreational aspect in terms of the size of deer that you can grow on it. It almost seems like it would cancel it out. Like, one extreme argument would be, well, let's buy this piece, let's clear cut it. It's not going to reduce the deer.
I just don't think there's many people that want to buy a clear cut. I mean,
what if I've killed three?
Like if it's cut so hard and to the point to where it takes it years to regenerate, and it's so hard to hunt it when it's like that.
Sure.
You know, like it just depends on how the land lays, but you know,
well, for
every
instance,
property.
Well, for instance, Ben, I mean, Ben Rising buys a piece of timber ground and it's got whatever on it. You clear cut it, you make your money back, and you kill 3 booners off of it in 3 years. You think somebody's going to not pay what you're asking for it because it doesn't have that timber?
Yeah, I mean that could happen, but the only way you're going to kill 3 booners off of it after you clear cut it is if you literally have fields in the front where you can pull them forward, or you live in a bait state. Because literally farms can get too thick for big deer. Like they literally get to the point to where the deer don't want to be in them.
Okay.
So it's like a really fine line. I truly believe that some of the best logged off pieces are pieces that have diversified logging going on. Like you got sections of woods that have never been touched. You've got sections of woods where there's been some select cutting. Maybe you've got some clear cut pockets over here, but they've got diversity. They don't just have 180-acre giant shithole that they got to try to walk.
So talk to us more about that, dude, because that idea is almost so foreign to me, coming from
because that's what I applied on this place,
exclusively pasture ground, where it's like we have no cover, like all the woods has been overrun with cattle and stuff, to where it's like it's hard for me to even imagine something that's too thick for a big buck.
Well, so down there in that country where your land is, you go in and you cut a woods really heavy. Within 5 years, you've got so much greenbrier you can't even walk through it.
Multiflora is what we have.
So much sunlight, so fast that the underbrush comes in so thick that the deer are like, holy crap, I can't even get around in here.
Yeah, multiflora is what we have, and it is.
Yeah.
We have some areas that are like
greenbrier, the multiflora, just all that junk. The olive comes in.
Yep.
You get everything. The undesirable invasive species take over to a point where, like, holy smokes, like even the deer, those big bucks, they just get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it depends on how big. Like I think, Ben, you probably saw the timber sale report from Madison. Like we've got a 4-acre, a 2-acre, and a 2-acre that are like basically clear cuts, right, on 130 acres, and then select cuts throughout. I mean, you're creating bedding, but you're also you're setting yourself up for perfect pinch points and downwind bedding to hunt. And, so you've got concentrations of that thicket, but, 90% of the property is just still, select cut timber.
Yeah. And again, it really all comes down to landowners' goals. I've had some families where, the landowner has held on to the timber forever. They just didn't need the money, but paid the taxes on the farm all these years. Guy knows that when he dies, the first thing his kids are going to do is cut all the timber, and get the money and whatever. And I'm like, sometimes they're better off to just cut the timber, put the money in their own pocket, disperse the money how they want, and it saves a lot of family drama. You get somebody that, say, inherits a piece of ground. And maybe the woods is important to them, but it's not like the ultimate thing. They want to do other things with the ground, and the timber can be a way for them to achieve their other goals. I don't think there's any completely wrong way to do it when you own your own land. It's up to you.
Yeah.
If the money can help you build a house or do this or whatever you want to do, then okay, yes. If you want to manage it, we can do that. If you want to go in and maximize on the financials, well, then you have to cut it harder. It just depends on what the woods has to even offer. Some woods don't have any good timber in it. For every good piece of timber I probably walk 12 to 13 of them that suck.
And do you think people just, because there's big trees, or what, trees in general, people just think it's good timber when they call you?
Well, a lot of people just don't know.
Yeah.
A lot of people really just do not know. and that's okay. You know, I mean, that's my job is to walk.
What do
woods,
you?
know?
Yeah, I mean, transparently, I didn't know. Like, all I knew is like, oh, that's a white oak. White oaks are worth more than this piece of shit over here,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I didn't know the actual value in it. It's just, you know, I knew what tree species were preferred, at least from a timber standpoint. But I'm also thinking from a hunting standpoint too. So,
Sure. Well, Ben, what do you do with like a shitty section of woods? Like if I've got 40 acres that's all just real squirrely looking cherry, what can you do with that?
Well, I mean, it's hard because, like, for one, the cherry market's down right now. But like, if you have an outlet for some of it you can harvest, or you can just decide, you know what, we're going to clean the slate in this section and start over. But you're going to need to kill the invasives at the same time, so when you do cut it really hard, it just doesn't come back to complete junk.
Yeah.
So it just depends. Like, there's different avenues you can take. Again, every property is different, and everybody's goals are different. So it's like, that's the first thing I ask somebody when I'm walking their woods is like, well, what is your real goals? Like, are you wanting to manage this woods so you can cut again and your kids can cut, or you and your wife want to get 2 cuttings out of it before you're done and you guys maximize your dollars, or, everything it's their land. It's up to them.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, in that scenario there, let's say there is very little marketable timber, you'd say, well, we'd like to, I don't know if it's possible to grow timber value in this piece of woods. And in the meantime, we'd like it to be good for hunting. What does that look like? Because it's not necessarily a timber harvest. You just have to pay a logger out of your pocket to come in and essentially clear cut and treat all of the invasives at the same time.
Well, I mean, that's going to be a hard task to get accomplished, because if there's no meat on the bone for most sawmills or whatever, like if they don't have anything to work with, that's why you can't get rid of the low grade and like red oak and, the good red oak and hard maple and stuff in Illinois hardly, because there's no market.
Right.
And the bloggers really can't make good money on it, so they don't want to fool with it.
So maybe that'd be more like an equip type project, like apply for government funding
something you just do on your own,
Yeah.
Herbicide spray, whatever, for like the invasives. But sometimes you just gotta let Mother Nature take its course too. Sometimes I feel like the effort isn't worth what it's really going to result in.
I tell you what, dude, I spent like several years as a teenager trying to spray multiflora out of stuff that we were getting ready to cut, and like I swear it didn't do anything. Like it killed it at the time, but it's just as thick today.
Dude, it comes back, so it's just like tree of heaven.
That's it.
That stuff is insane.
Yeah.
Can you burn it out?
I mean, you'll top kill it, but it's still, I mean, that root system is nasty.
Probably just grow more.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I mean, it's tough. I mean, and that's when you think about like, think about even like a TSI project, right? Like a lot of people talk about TSI and certain things. I mean, you've got to do some significant cutting in an area to make a difference. Going in there and dropping a few trees and open it up isn't gonna necessarily do it for what you're trying to accomplish.
And it's just like, so like people that cut grapevines, like, oh, I'd cut a bunch of grapevines in my woods today, like, help quit choking the trees. Cool. Did you spray it with Tordon or
because it's
weed on 70 or something to kill the vine after you cut it? No, I just cut them. Well, that was worse. You just actually made your wood worse.
Yeah. And I think
they'll sprout 50 times more.
Yeah. I think that it's like anything on the land side. I mean, there's certain things that are pretty laid out, like cash rent and things like that. But timber's is super intimidating, I think, to people. And again, for most of it, it's just because, number one, there's a market, right? The market fluctuates, and number two is you don't really know what you have, especially if you're trying to I didn't know what I had walking that property. Like if you had told me, there were that much good white oak on that, I'd be like, I don't know, there's a pocket here that I saw, but it's because I probably wasn't cruising like a timber cruise was going to do.
It's not hard to find out. I mean, typically there's, no more than 3 to 5 valuable timber species like on a piece of property. If you can identify them and then say it's whatever size of those is starting to get into money, you can at least have an idea of if it's valuable or not.
Mm-hmm.
Then a lot of it depends on the quality of it. Like if it's short and stubby and limby, or is it nice and tall, growed together? clean, not all crooked and, things like that. That all determines the factors of what something's worth.
Yeah.
And, like the classic, I've got a giant walnut in my yard. Well, it's probably full of nails, 22 shells,
Yeah, no, for sure.
And it's linear, not, and no, this thing's straight. It's 100 feet tall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It just depends, but like, it just there's so many factors in the timber thing, and that's like so me and Madison, we've been talking some, and I think I'm actually I'm going to open up the doors a little more on the Whitetail Edge side of the brand of things and utilize a guy like Madison to help other landowners.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, we can offer a service that needs to be taken, obviously with my own job of buying timber and supplying a sawmill, I can do that too. But then you have some landowners that selling the timber is just not their ultimate goal.
Right.
It's more about things. And so that's where like offering that service through Whitetail Edge. And if Madison's able to do it in the future, then, giving him some work like that can really help landowners.
Yeah. And so Ben's talking about Madison for anyone listening to this. Madison's the timber consultant that I used on my property. And we're going to have Madison on the podcast here after we get through the bid stuff and talk kind of a deeper breakdown on the Ohio property and stuff. But yeah, I mean, what I liked about talking with Madison kind of out of the gate is, he immediately kind of, and I guess every landowner maybe isn't where I'm at, but he immediately embraced what I was looking for out of that property, which was, it is an investment, but now I want to make cuts that are going to help from a deer angle, right? From a hunting angle and from a habitat angle. But I also, to your point, Ben, want, whether it's me in 5 years or the next person in 5 years, to walk that property and say, oh, there's a bunch of white oak here and here's some red oak here. And like, it's not, basically raped out of there to where, they're walking through and it's just all trash.
Yeah.
So,
100%.
You brought up, and I watched this the other day, you brought up Bobby Kendall. I saw that you did a property breakdown. Maybe, was it Illinois or maybe Missouri?
Yeah.
Not too
Illinois.
Illinois. I think.
Well, we did not. I did one in Missouri too.
You did. Okay. So I think that's it. So Bobby's group is what? Whitetail Group? Is that what it's called?
The White.
Yep. And so, I think I've seen more and more of his listings because of we've been looking out there. Mm-hmm. I think he does a really cool job based on what we're talking about here. And like, he's laying it out for a hunter, like for deer hunting, right?
As far as like, here's the thing. So Bobby's into the logging business. Yes, he's cutting the walnut and the white oak too, but Bobby's go a lot deeper in the scheme of like a thought out process, why you're doing certain things, where he's dropping certain tops, to maneuver deer certain places. Where do you want the food plots? Like his process is so much deeper than just your average guy with a log skidder and a chainsaw in the Midwest that just want to go in and cut your white oak and your walnut.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
Bobby's approach is a whole lot different. And he's a lot more professional on how he does things. And, I've tried to turn a lot of landowners his direction that were wanting to sell timber, telling them to meet with him first. And he has cut other species too. I mean, Bobby's done some jobs where they've cut other species, not just high graded.
Yeah. I just because of the way that he's laid things out and does, I guess what I saw you in was like, you guys did it like a YouTube video explaining the property and why things were laid out, food structures, where things had been cut for habitat or for bedding, and I think that when a lot of people are looking at turnkey type things, what those guys are doing, I mean, they're giving you history, they're giving you a plan there or structure and strategy on that. I also didn't feel like, and I don't mean this in a disrespect to any, I don't feel like they were pricing it super high either. Like,
yeah, no, Bobby's very, I don't know how you say it. Bobby is very realistic.
Yeah.
The dude is not greedy whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like literally he just loves what he does so much. It's such a passion for him that as long as he doesn't go broke, I think he's happy.
Yeah. Well,
like literally. I mean, I've known deals that he's made 10 grand on or less. I've known deals he's probably almost lost or broke even, but it helped him achieve a goal on another farm or this or that, or it led to another lead. The guy is just not greedy. Now, I'm not saying you're going to go beat him down on his price at the point where it makes no sense, because that's not going to happen. He knows his values, but he doesn't sit there and go, okay, I'm going to go in and cut $100,000 worth of timber out of this farm. I bought it for this, and then I'm going to tack this much to it. Yeah. I'm going to walk out of here making 50%.
Yeah.
That he doesn't look at things that way. He's like, I'm going to totally rake somebody over the coals to make a ton of money.
Well, I didn't even know he was cutting timber. I mean, that makes a lot more sense why they are reasonable, because if he can cut some timber off of it, he's making money there, and so
he reduces his base right off the start, and he doesn't always buy jobs that have timber on them. It just depends on, the deal, what he can turn it into. He'll buy farms that'll be nothing but brush and good hunting, but they'll have tillable, and he'll harvest the tillable off and keep it, and then sell the hunting part of it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Makes sense.
He's a young guy, but that dude is a genius.
Very cool.
He moved his whole life to go do that and started it out there. Didn't know nothing about timber. He was a country music singer, and then he's very, very interesting fella. And he's a really good friend of mine, and he's just a super cool guy. And he's like, I don't know, how you meet some people, you just know they have zero angles.
Yeah.
Like no ill bones, no angles. Like he wouldn't even think of doing some of the things that I've known that have been done to him by other realtors, things like that. And he just he looks at me and he goes, I just don't even know what they're thinking. He's like, do you know how many farms I buy a year? Why would they literally do that or go around me or screw me over for one deal?
Yeah.
When I could buy the dude's bought an astronomical amount of farms in his day.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I've followed them more and more in what they've done. And I guess it was in a good way, surprised that they weren't insanely priced.
Yeah. And we've been trying to find more ways to partner ourselves together, mesh the branch, but it's a little bit tough, but we're figuring it out. We're trying to figure out how we can do it, but Bobby's really one of my really good friends. He's a guy he's come into my circle in the last 2 years, and he's just one of those guys that you keep close to your chest because he's just a good dude.
Well, I think even hearing you on that video, you were talking about some of the ways to hunt that place and break it down. For anybody looking to buy that property, where the hell are they going to get that advice from? So
the thing, anything we do like that, really we want people to benefit. And that's even with my show, Whitetail Edge. Dude, I think you guys have realized I don't hold the info in anymore. I don't charge for it. I don't I want people to be able to use what I've learned and it to benefit them.
Yeah.
I'm not stingy about it. I've had a great run. I've cut a lot of great deer. So why not be a blessing to somebody else and help them be able to do the same thing?
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, speaking of that, and obviously it's early being June, but any places you're feeling super optimistic about this year? Did you draw Kansas?
I did.
There you go.
Which I did last year, so I did draw this year, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't know what's going to happen in Ohio this year. The deer that I had planned for this year, he ended up getting shot in November last year. So my neighbor passed him. We had been passing him, leaving him alone, and he ended up getting killed by a neighbor.
On a corn pile.
On a corn pile with a crossbow.
Yeah.
So, anyways.
The tale as old as time.
What's that?
It's a tale as old as time.
Yeah.
That's what happens in Ohio.
Yeah. So anyways, and whatever. And you know what? And I look at it like this too. And I had to, I didn't own that deer. It wasn't my deer. And the guy that killed it, he had a horrible tree stand accident a few years earlier. Guy was lucky to even be hunting.
Jeez.
And so, you know what? It is what it is, man.
Yeah.
Like, good for him. Maybe he didn't shoot it with a crossbow. I just said that. I don't know.
We're just assuming. It was probably a rifle.
But, you know, I was happy for him in a sense. I mean, I was more disheartened at the deer.
We know the feeling. Yeah, we get it.
Because, like, literally, it was the only deer I've had in the last 10 years that literally could have been a 200 this year. And he was only 4.5. And so, like, he was going to be unbelievable this year. And we were super jacked about it. I mean, even my Amish neighbor, Leroy, passed him. And Leroy only owns 24 acres. And out of the 24, probably 10 of it are huntable.
Wow.
He passed him. Leroy, he passed him. He even said to me, he's like, because we talked about it, and the deer like to bet a lot between, you know, deer betted on me, but he would frequent Leroy's, you know, corn and his food plot. And I said, Leroy, you going to pass that deer? And we talked, and he's like, you know, Ben, he goes, it's hard, and I don't really want to.
It's just hard, Ben. It's just hard.
He said, but he goes, I'll never have a chance to really hunt a 200-inch deer probably on this amount of land. He said, and that deer will be 200 next year. And he freaking passed it.
Wow.
Well, dude, talking about like the neighbor issues and comparing states like Ohio to Illinois is like, that's one of the things that's so appealing about, and both Jeremy and I have ground in Ohio where we're dealing with some of the same issues or circumstances. It's like in Illinois and other non-baiting states, it seems like the playing field is so leveled, you know, by the removal of baiting, because you can have 1,000-acre farm in Ohio and like manage the crap out of it, the timber, you know, your food plots, you can put all this work into it. And chances are, like, those deer that you're passing at 4 years old that are in the 160s will get killed on a 20 or smaller acre tract over a corn pile with a rifle or a crossbow.
Yeah, 100%.
That's just what happens.
It's just, that's why we started investing in different states.
Yeah.
Because we just I don't like it.
Can't do it.
And I just felt like I was throwing my money away. Same with big leases anymore.
Yeah.
I could care less about leasing a giant tract of land because it does not matter in Ohio.
No.
Not in Ohio.
Yeah. Go lease 20 acres.
That's right.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think
the right 5 acres. I mean, dude, that's literally where most of them get. It's between Jed and I and the guys that we know, and Jeremy, you'll experience it too. We've got a lot of acres tied up, and yeah, we do some baiting as well just to keep ourselves in the game. But a majority of those deer that we have passed that get killed are on like our 20 or less acres, sometimes 5 or less acres.
I don't think you.
Yeah. Well.
Go, Ben.
It's just like the deer I was just talking about. I mean. And again, I'm not knocking that guy, but they don't even own the land. He just had permission to hunt. And it's a 30-acre piece that comes right into my grill. Yep. And literally they plant their food plot and their blind and their bait right in the corner of my property.
Yeah.
And literally, finally the deer he had bred all the does on my side of the fence. And he just ended up following another doe over to there. To that corn pile, and bam. And
the food plot is irrelevant at that point. Like, it's great that they put the effort into doing that, but it's like it's the corn pile that kills them.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, and again, not knocking the guy, but they were like, didn't even know this deer existed.
They never do.
Well, and I mean, I think to that point, like take away those corn piles and only have, you know, your neighbor Leroy with a small food plot and that guy with a small food plot, and then your managed piece. That deer is going to spend the majority of his time on there. He's not going to be tempted to leave out of that place or to go over and explore a 20-acre parcel. Because
at least not until dark.
Right. It's a level playing field at that point. The moment that those corn piles come into play, and the only places I think that you see it not being as important, I do think you're starting to see it in Kansas start to play an effect on killing a lot of these 3-year-olds and things like that, is like Kentucky. There's just not as many hunters in Kentucky. I mean, we looked at it the other day. What did it say? There was 52 or 62,000 bow hunters in Kentucky. There's 198,000 in Ohio, right? So it's like 4 times as many bow hunters in Ohio than there are Kentucky, and they're similar sized states. Like you don't
think so? I don't think and I don't know very much about Kentucky, but I don't think the age structure is nearly as good as Illinois. Maybe Ohio, because that's another base
I'm comparing to Ohio.
Oh, yeah, I'd say they're relatively the same. Way less habitat, probably, in Kentucky. than Ohio.
I don't know. I just don't think that the corn piles definitely play a role in Kentucky. I'm not saying that. I just don't see as much of a negative effect in Kentucky as I do in Ohio.
Yeah.
Maybe because of parcel and hunter density.
Hunter numbers is certainly going to do it. Yeah.
So.
Well, you do a flyover in Ohio in the wintertime with a drone, or you even talk to a game warden that's done a flyover in the wintertime. And you just say, well, how many corn piles did you see? And it's just funny the answer you get, like, you couldn't even begin to count.
Yeah.
Like, find an area that wasn't corn pile.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like,
it's just all corn.
100 yards.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, and dude, minerals the same way. Not that it's like that's what's killing deer necessarily, but it's funny when you go out and dump minerals. Like chances of you being within like 100 yards of somebody else's mineral or a cattle mineral or something. It's just them are freaking everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, but again, like the mineral side of things, I look at a little bit different, just because typically my deer after August they don't even care about.
Yeah,
they don't even
mine either.
I agree. Yep, I agree.
You know, and so like you could possibly kill one because of the mineral, but very seldom. Mm-hmm. You know, like a lot of those states have that thing where you can't hunt within so much of a mineral lick, where it's an illegal baiting state. But honestly, I feel like the mineral plays zero effect on a deer come deer season.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I think to that point, you know, you use the example of your Illinois farm, Ben, but I mean, freaking Ohio, like if I've got a chunk of land in Ohio, like Jared, your farm, you got 1,000 acres in Ohio that you're managing, you got crops on it, you did TSI. If I can find 10 acres next to your farm and drop a corn pile, I'm gonna kill one of your big deer.
Do you know my neighbors?
I mean,
you must know them. Huh?
That's it. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Is like that. That is you know. And
well, dude, I don't know, Ben, if you talk to Jed at all very much anymore, but he's got a piece of ground. It's closer to Columbus or something like that. I don't know how big his piece is, like, 80 or 100. And he's got these two, you know, I think 3-year-olds, two really nice 3-year-olds. And he's like, man, those are the two I'd really like to see through. They got shot in the same day on, I think it was opening day of gun season on a 10-acre tract that neighbor did over the same corn pile. And he sends me a picture of like the truck bed with these 2 deer in it. And he's like, that's literally the status quo.
Yeah.
Yep. That's what happens, dude, all the time. And I mean, again, you know, some people listen and be like, well, they're not your deer and you're just being a selfish prick. And, you know, and I get it. But, dude, it just stinks because, like, when you put so much effort into getting these deer to that age and your goal is so much different than the other guys, and then, you know, and they think it's funny because they know you wanted that deer so bad and they killed it. But, like, look, dude, it's not just about the killing. Or, like, I could have killed the deer 2 years in a row, easy, any day I wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it wasn't about that. It was about getting him to a certain point, his full potential, like what he truly deserved to be. And then making him a movie star and giving the deer the credit that he truly deserves to be able to sort of survive where he did, you know?
Yeah, and I think the thing is those people just don't care. Like they, you know, they'll go out on a Saturday, and I don't say this disrespectfully. They'll go out on a Saturday. If they kill a 3-year-old buck Saturday morning, they'll be happy and they're watching football by noon and like have forgot about it.
Good for them.
Yeah.
I get it. But when they're the ones that are laughing or think it's funny that their corn pile took your deer that you were really trying to get, when they think it's that funny, though, that's the part that bothers me.
Well, and like, that's a small minority too. I know what you're talking about. There's that mentality, but most guys have no idea. They're just like, this is just how we do it. You know, I don't know. That's our spot, hunting spot. And like you said, they didn't know about the deer in most cases. And I think for the most part, it's harmless.
I think it's the fact that there's just a small percentage of us that just really care about, you know, not even just harvesting that animal, to your point, but just getting it to its full potential, or, you know, all the effort that goes into, you know, managing the habitat and then tracking the deer via cameras and just living it, you know, 365 days a year, basically.
Yeah.
And there's other,
just like if Leroy would have killed that deer, the Amish guy, dude, I would have hugged him.
Yeah.
I'd have been so happy for him. Like, it literally, I would have been like, dude, you deserved it.
Yeah.
You were just as much part of this deer getting to this point as I was.
For sure.
Right.
So good for you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Well, dude, I think
have a guy go send you the picture and go, never knew this deer.
Well, dude, I think because I can relate. We just want people to appreciate the deer as much as we do.
They won't.
Well, and
They just
some
won't.
people do. That's why
Most will not.
any three of us on a I mean, if we were hunting the same deer, I would be legitimately just
Absolutely.
as happy.
Yeah.
Because I know, that you've stayed up at night thinking about it, and you've put the same level of effort.
I bet it's 10%. 10% of, like, let's just use Ohio.
10%.
10% of the hunters will care about what we're talking about as much as we do. The other 90% just...
I'm going to say it's less than that.
No, I don't think it is. I think it's gotten more. I mean, think about the number of serious hunters out there in Ohio. It's probably 10%.
Maybe
30,000.
I think it's less.
Give or take 30 to 40,000 people
that have my same level.
I mean,
if
I'm not saying
if you're putting it right up,
same.
I'm going to say 1%.
Yeah, I'm not saying
Half
that.
of 1%.
I'm just saying, like, actually, like, they think about deer most of the year.
I think it's less than 10%.
Maybe. I don't know.
I would love for it to be more.
Mm-hmm.
I would.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'll tell you, in my area, what I have seen, though, a lot of the Amish are buying ground around these parts now, but I'll tell you, it's not a bad thing anymore. I mean, it's drove the land prices up, but a lot of these guys that are spending that kind of money, they're really doing a good job of trying to manage deer. And I have really high hopes that in the next next years, we're going to start seeing a lot more bigger deer being produced again in my neck of the woods, because these guys are buying a lot of the farms that are coming up for sale now. I think they're a lot more serious about it than, even a lot of the English, truthfully.
And I would assume
if I got to give credit to anybody for that, it's Don Higgins.
Yeah, probably. The Amish whisperer.
Yeah.
I would say that they're also probably keeping those bigger tracks intact, right, Ben? I mean, they're
trying. Yeah, a lot of them are. Yeah. I mean, or like they'll come up at auction in parcels, but then buy it as a whole at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, they're definitely driving prices up. I mean, because they're paying, they're pulling money together from a community
Talk
standpoint.
about group buying power.
Yeah, there you go. That is the epitome of group buying power. But to that point, I mean, how many? Like, I was just looking. I don't know. I was in like Tuscaroras or one of the counties over there in Ohio. They had an auction, and it was like 80 acres, which would be awesome. But it was 4 different parcels, and it's like, there's a chance that 80 acres now becomes 420s, and it's like, what the hell? But that's where land is going. I mean, these parcels are just constantly getting broken up and broken up and broken up and broken up. And eventually, instead of the average guy owning 80 acres, the average guy's going to own 20, because that's what a parcel is.
Yep.
So, I don't know. But anyways.
Interesting.
Well, dude, we appreciate you coming on this morning and talking with us. And where are you right now? What part of the state? You said you were out.
I'm in Ohio.
You are in Ohio. Yeah. What part of the state? Ohio.
Yeah. I'm in Ohio right now. I got some timber to look at this afternoon. I'm going to get that handled and maybe finish putting some beans in the ground later this evening.
Well, cool, dude. Well, we'll let you go to work, and I'll be looking forward to that bid later.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
All right, buddy.
See you, brother.
Will. Bye.
Later. The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Hoyt Archery.
Dude, where would we be without our Hoyt bows?
Probably shooting crossbows.
or a Matthews, yeah.
One and the same.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, we love being Hoyt guys because you stand out. When you're in this room full of other people that shoot these other types of bows, I feel like the Hoyt guys just stick out.
Dude, it's just a legit bow. I mean, especially that carbon riser, man. I mean, I know that they've got several other aluminum lines as well, but for me, I'm shooting that RX5 in the carbon model. They've since come out with the RX7, and I can't tell you how much I love being a Hoyt guy amongst a sea full of Matthews guys. So we're out there, I think, proving them wrong, shooting 80 pounds and killing stuff.
Hey, man, if you want to get serious, get Hoyt. Sweet. Awesome to have Ben Funnies. Because Madison said he was like, yep, Ben's going to put a bet in. I was like, good. Hope it's a good one.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure.
It's an interesting process.
Wants to work with Ben. I'm sure he wants to be on the property too.
Yeah. So I know we've got several kind of podcasts lined up here, but I would say in the next, handful of podcasts, we're going to have Madison on, who's my timber consultant, and kind of really break down. There's some things I know from the industry, and Ben said the same thing. Like, there's some inner stuff that, like, they don't don't want to talk about too much or highlight too much because, there's kind of an unspoken agreement internally that you don't want just everything aired out. Like, Google anything and just try to find like how timber bids and stuff. Like, there's no information on it, right? It's like a secret sauce that's within the community of how these guys are valuing things that are out there. Yes, there's a market for this, but there's also margins and stuff that they have to make.
Yeah, well, it's not rocket science. I mean, it was interesting to hear that, like in Illinois, and sounds like this has mainly to do because of there's fewer timber buyers,
sawmills.
Because like in Ohio, you're gonna work through a forestry consultant. The consultant's gonna
put it out to the buyers,
walk your woods, and put it out to your loggers, and those guys are gonna bid on it based off of work that they're doing in the area. What they see as far as timber values. Maybe they get like if they sell a certain quantity of what it's just they're running their own business. Mm-hmm. Here's what we want to output from this, and here's our cost.
Mm-hmm. So like if I was doing, let's say so on my property, transparently we did it. It was like there's about 300,000 board feet to come off. If it was 50,000, I'd get much less bids. Because of where I'm at in retrospect to the
it's gonna be worth a squeeze.
The mill run, the mills, they're not gonna come down there for 2 weeks. It's not worth it. But for 300,000, it's gonna take them almost 8 weeks to harvest the timber off of that place. So I mean, there's a lot more time they can dedicate. Thus, juice is worth the squeeze a little bit more. They're still gonna have to truck that to the mill, which is obviously a cost coming out. But yeah, the bid process is kind of crazy. So today it's June 8th. Today at 4 p.m. my bids close. So everybody's putting in sealed bids right now. And then Madison's going to call me this evening, and we're going to open those sealed bids and go through them, and then that's where we'll pick one.
Cool.
And then I'll do timber contract with whoever we decide to go with.
And they're not real complicated, right? It's just basically a number.
It's a number. They're also there's certain things that are that'll get agreed to in the timber contract, like
mainly your red pine clearing.
The red pine clearings, and then a perimeter road is what I asked for as well, for them to have a perimeter road in there just for access purposes and stuff. So and it's so funny because, like, I'm sure these guys talk. Like, I'm sure Ben talks to some of these other buyers, but I don't, these bids seem like they can be pretty wide ranges in terms of somebody may overbid it because they need the work,
Right.
It'll be interesting to see, but we're going to bring Madison on.
It's probably illegal for them to talk to.
I bet it is.
It's like price fixing.
Yeah. Same.
Say, hey, let's not bid over.
Just like our real estate side.
Right.
Yeah. Say, hey, don't take a commission more than 5% or whatever it is. So, so we're going to do that today. So I would assume, because it's going to take a little bit to get contract in place, I would assume in the next handful of podcasts, we'll have Madison on, and we're really going to kind of dive prying into what he saw versus property and talk numbers. Like, we're pretty transparent on here, so we'll talk numbers.
It was interesting to hear Ben say to agree. And so Ben's talking from more of a logger perspective. So somebody like Madison would sell to somebody like Ben.
Correct.
And so a private forestry consultant will take a commission of the total?
10%.
Yeah. Okay. So 10% of, is it?
Whatever I get paid.
Whatever you get paid.
Yep.
Which sounds like, and I had not heard that. So Ben's saying it could be 40-60, it could be 50-50.
He's saying that that's how they sell it in Illinois. So when they go to market, it's a 40-60 or 50-50 split. Whatever the market brings, then they split the check with the landowner. In my case, they buy it stumpage, which is they're buying, like, I'll know when these bids come in what they're going to pay for it. What they sell it for, I have no idea.
Do you think it's still close? Like, do you think, so if it's 50-50, let's just say for round numbers, your cut is $100,000.
Mm-hmm. So then they're going to make $100,000?
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
Or is that what you'd expect?
No, I bet it's a lot more than that.
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what I would assume just because of equipment and everything. What they gross is going to have to be probably more than 50-50, I would assume. But I don't know.
It would depend on their cost.
Yeah. And I mean, you can look at some of the market. Like if you look and see, whatever, it's $500 per 1,000 board feet on something, right?
Yeah.
So
just
then,
do the math.
Yeah. So then if I have 300,000 board feet, right? So whatever, 300 times 500, right, is what, 150,000?
Well, yeah, I guess I don't know. I mean, let's say it is 100,000. Let's say total numbers 200,000. Mm-hmm. I can't see it costing more than $20,000 or $30,000 for them to go in and take the timber off.
Yeah, probably not.
Right, so they profit still
70 or 80 grand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably right.
So I bet it's still close. I bet there's a rough.
So I would say like
Percentage
if
that they're shooting for?
300,000 is worth 150 to me, then they have another 150 on top of that. So it's about
Because it's
$1.
your timber. You're basically just paying them to take it off, and they need to make some money on it too. That's their business.
Yeah.
So
correct.
yeah, I mean, you should get half or a majority of the
I don't know how
total
that'll work.
value.
But yeah, then 10% of mine goes to the consultant.
Yep.
And then, part of that is to do this bidding process. The other part is they'll check in to make sure that the crew is doing what they're supposed to do. They run it essentially.
Yeah. That's huge.
Yeah. So that's happening today, which is kind of exciting.
Which I assume you still want. Like, I mean, I don't love the idea in Illinois of going straight to the loggers because it's not that they would be not truthful, but
Well, it's why you don't, and no offense to Ben, but it's why I don't go straight necessarily to a logger, especially because, if I go to them, there is no bid process, right? There is no competitiveness.
It's the same thing as in real estate. It's the same reason I don't just go to my neighbor and say, hey, what we pay for it, because you don't know unless, the only way to realize the true market value of whether it's timber or an actual piece of property is to put it on the open market and let people bid on it.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting. I don't know if we'll have 5 bids today. I don't know if we'll have 10 bids today.
Yeah. I don't know.
But we'll go.
I assume anybody that's in proximity of it will bid on it, because.
Well, I mean, Ben's not really even that in proximity, and he's bidding on it.
Right. So even further than that. So I'll respect a handful.
I mean, he said, 10 to 12 or something.
Bids?
Is what's common.
Cool. Well, there you go.
So, yeah, it'll be exciting to start opening those up and see what it brings.
Nice. Perfect timing for... Because we're looking, right? We got a few.
We're looking.
Got a few on the docket. Who knows, dude? I do think, and I was kind of prying into to Ben there on like, because you got to be careful, like approaching neighbors. Like anytime somebody else realizes that you're interested in something, like, I don't know, things have a way of changing. Like, oh, so-and-so is interested. And so.
Oh, I mean, I've been in it. I offered my neighbors to buy on a land contract. Which was turned down.
And it came up for sale shortly after?
Not yet, but they've told me numbers that they want, and it's drugs.
Yeah.
It's 3 times what the market's asking for.
You're like, yeah, I can pay you a drug. Sure.
It's freaking crazy. And some of its advantages. And again, this is the weird thing. We talked about this with Duncan, is that property is worth more to me than it is anybody else.
Yep.
Right? So I'll pay over market if I know that it's a long-term property for me. If it's a flip property, no, I won't. But I'm not going to pay absurdly over market, because then I'm out. Like, I'm in the red on that. That makes no sense. It defeats the purpose of doing it.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's there's situations I think that works well. I think there's a lot of situations that the moment you show interest, right, then it's like, now we can really ask for money.
And I guess I don't quite know what it's kind of a fine line of like, so if you and I are looking in Illinois, best case scenario, we go talk to all the neighbors and just get the scoop. Say, hey, do you guys hunt? What's the scenario here? What do you know about it? But you run the risk of like, of showing your car, showing that you're interested, and then all of a sudden somebody else is interested and whatever else.
Yeah, I think it's the market right now is very tough. From a standpoint of thinking that you want to buy with a deal in mind, and maybe that's paying full price, but there's great timber that hasn't been accounted for. Because I think that's what happened in my case.
Deals in this case come from knowing where to look and having knowledge that other people don't.
I think that's a big piece of, and we'll get into it in detail when Madison comes on, but I paid fair market value for this Ohio property. The timber wasn't realized though. And I'm not saying that I would have paid that same amount for a clear cut. Right,
and there was some luck involved too, right? Because like you saw, like you said, some white oaks, but you didn't necessarily realize.
I had no idea what the value was.
Yeah,
that's why I wrote Ben and was like, dude, like,
what's the value?
Are these like harvestable trees? Like, I have no idea, right? I'm completely naive to that.
Yeah.
So there was absolute way more than luck. I mean, I went into this thing transparently. My goal was to get like $50,000 or $60,000 out of this select cut, which would have paid almost my down payment back, right? Per Madison, and we'll see where the bids come in, it may be 3 times that.
Yeah.
I had no concept of that actually happening, but neither did the person who sold me the property.
Yeah.
So, there's some interesting situations. The thing is, and now that I've kind of got a taste of that, I'm like, oh man, I should really look for this. They don't exist very often. Ben said it, right? I mean, he looks at a lot of timber. They don't exist very often. Right. Just like if you would luck into oil and gas, you buy a piece of property that's oil and gas. 2 years later, you get a phone call and they're going to pay you $3,000 an acre for a one-time lease and then royalties. Like it doesn't happen very often anymore. So it's just, that's where it's hard to go into these things. There are deals that happen out there. And if you can find one, it may, like this Ohio property may set me on a trajectory to where we buy in Illinois and maybe I buy another farm in Ohio. Like it could be the luck driving force that sets me on a course that I didn't expect I could be on.
Yeah.
Sounds like Ben's in that case. They bought that property 2 years later, it adds $2,000 an acre. He's got $300,000 in equity on that thing like that.
Boy. That was the time to buy, 2019.
Those are the trajectories that start to happen that it's like, man, I mean, if you get into one of those, it sets you on a whole new path to what you can buy or do in the future. It's just few and far between.
Yeah.
And so when a lot of us are staring at land and it's like, man, I don't know, $5,000 an acre for this piece in Illinois. Well, 5 years from now, maybe it's $7,000 an acre. We don't know. Like, we have no idea what that's going to end up in. The people who bought in 2019 guarantee didn't think that it was going to go up $2,000 or $3,000 an acre by 2021.
It was interesting, and I don't know if I quite remember exactly what my thought process was here. I was in the shower last night, and I was thinking,
Is this before or after you lost the tooth?
You know what? It was actually this morning. It was after. This morning I was in the shower.
Okay.
And I was just thinking, it might have been yesterday. I don't know. A lot of thoughts.
A lot of
in the
thoughts
shower.
going on.
When that cold water hits me, the mind starts going. I was thinking about just the statement that like they're not making any more of it in terms of land and how it affects like the value. Looking at that taking that. Just straightforward considering that it's like, yeah, okay, so it's only going to get more and more valuable. But they're only making more and more people too.
Yeah.
Right? And so like because look at even just the United States, it's like, yes, at one time it was like, oh, there was this huge valuable asset, like in the sense of like available land, and like people have bought it up over time. Like it almost begs the question, like, does it, just like the public land thing, like it's like, yeah, there's a lot of it, but it gets caught up with, you can have too much demand to where it's like there's all of it got bought, literally like all of it gets bought, and then it's like and then the value starts to diminish.
Well, I think that's where there's a standpoint of, this is where this inflection point on hunting comes in, recreational land at least, and even farming to a point. Like we talked about this, these people that are buying $20,000 an acre farm ground, like we know the value of crops. It's like, how are they ever going to make money? Now, a lot of it is they have land that's paid off, so they're just leveraging the equity and continue to buy. But at some point, that makes it unavailable for other people to start farming, because you can't just come in and start buying $20,000 acre land and make money farming. Doesn't happen. So in your case, the number of farmers are going to drop, which in turn I think will stop land from a tillable standpoint being so valuable.
Well, so think about it from a deer hunting standpoint.
Same thing.
So all of your 80 acres, which is enough.
A lot.
Enough.
Average parcel around 80 acres.
Well, and in terms of like, to be effective at managing a deer herd, for instance, like 80 acres is about what you need.
That's minimum.
And if all your 80s start turning into 20s, even though there's a demand for it, people will buy all those 20s. The output, like the value from a deer hunting standpoint attached to each of those pieces of property starts to decrease because it can't produce the same.
20 acres doesn't do anything for you.
Yeah.
I think in the same do the flip side of that, right? Somebody starts to come in and buy all these 80s and now they own 800 acres and these people own 800 acres. Access is cut off.
I don't think that's happening. That's happening way less than it did 10, 15 years ago.
But I'm saying that cuts off access for a lot of people. People stop hunting. Numbers drop. I don't think demand is there for the recreational ground as more.
Well, yeah, if there's nowhere to hunt, then yeah.
So you got two different things. Is like you could go either direction. I think we're trending in the way that you're talking, where it's going to be multiple 20s. That a 20-acre piece is like, great, you got space. I ain't gonna do shit from a hunting management standpoint. If you got a corn pile on it, you can kill deer.
Yeah, well, and it may be both, you know, in some capacity. Like, yes, maybe private landowners buy more of those 20s or 80s and protect themselves from outside hunting pressure. And
We talked about that just now with the Amish.
and the values are sustained, if not improved. Maybe at a public scale, that's also like in terms of access to a greater portion of it. You know, I don't know if it's game commissions or whatever. Somehow the public is gaining access to more of the private land.
Yeah, co-op deals and stuff.
You know, just to preserve the parcel size. Because whether it's private or public, the smaller the parcel size, like the less value it can produce from a deer hunting standpoint. That's the reality.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I don't believe, I mean, there are groups like us that were like, man, if I could have 500 acres, right? The average American doesn't want a lot of property. Yeah, because they don't want to manage it. They don't have to do shit on it.
Sure.
Right? They want a house.
Well, in
yard.
reality, in theory, every deer hunter wants as much property as they can.
And so take what we talked about with these fires. Like, you know, Ohio's 27, 28 million acres. It's a lot of land.
Inconceivable.
Lot of land.
Inconceivable.
Yeah. 28 million acres is a lot of land.
Uh-huh.
And so, you know, it's hard to believe that there's not some sort of inflection point. It's somewhere here along the lines to where the demand for driving price of land up hits a peak until that land is taken away into, with human population, development, right? Because that's the only thing. It's like if you and I are buying land for deer hunting, or Ben's buying land for deer hunting, and we're using it for deer hunting, and then it goes back into the market for deer hunting, that land is just always there, right? They're not making any more of it. Doesn't really apply there. But when they're taking it out of that habitat into development because they need it for increasing populations and urban sprawl and everything else, now the point of they're not making any more land is a valid argument.
I think it's not just development, it's profit. You know, so if I own 80 acres and I subdivide off 40 of it to sell 40 for development, yeah, it's getting less.
Yep.
But if I subdivide 40 acres off of it and sell each to hunters, maybe the impact is not nearly as much, but still,
yeah,
it still applies.
Yeah, it does. It's just not as grand scale because it's still 80 acres.
Or make it more extreme.
Ground.
Maybe I turn my 80 into 20s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a weird thing when it comes around because I do think that I think we're in a point of land stabilization in terms of price right now. Like there's certain areas prices are going up. Like for whatever reason in my area, Kentucky, prices are going up pretty quickly because they're going to build this resort down there.
Generally speaking, though, definitely stagnated.
Yeah, it's flatline at this point. But I mean, 3 years from now, that we're not saying, "Damn, dude, you can't believe that we passed that at $5,000 an acre. It's worth $8 now." I mean, it's the same concept that we would have said pre-COVID. Yeah. You know, like, oh, I don't know about paying $3. Now it's worth $6. And it's like you can't. All you can project though is over the course of history, with ebbs and flows and a lot of stabilization, the trend line is going diagonally up for land prices. Mm-hmm. And I don't see that ever stopping.
Well, that's what my conversation is, or like my question is, like, we've never had a completely full United States. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so for all of history, like, it was an undeveloped country.
Yeah.
Right? It was like we've been just filling the space.
Yeah.
And it's not like we're full at this point. Like, there's still several thousand acres tract, but at what point are you out of inventory, thus out of...
Yeah, and I don't think it'll happen in our lifetimes.
No, I don't either.
But I do think that it will always be, and to Ben's point of being like kind of the land horror of the thing, that land will always be increasing in value with some ebb and flow to it. And so...
Sure.
100 years from now, when I'm off this earth and you know, maybe my kids or my grandkids are probably around, if they have that piece of property, inevitably it'll be worth 2-3-fold of what I paid for it.
Sure.
That's how it's going to be generationally.
Yeah, agreed.
And so I think that's where it's such a hard thing to fathom that we're sitting here bickering about $1,000 an acre either way, where our grandkids or 2 generations from now are going to be sitting there with a 300+% return if we bought it now, whatever it's at.
Yeah, and it's interesting in terms of like, just distribution of wealth. Like at that point, like what is it right now?
I mean, that is
what
the wealth
percent,
aspect
what percentage
of it,
of it's such a hard thing to put in the United States, what percentage of people can afford to buy?
Well, but think about the number of people that want to buy it. That I would say 90+% of America doesn't want to buy land. It's not even on their radar, right? They live in New York City and they're buying the apartment here, or the studio flat here, right?
Agreed.
So when you talk about, and in the general history, minus the 1%ers, right? Most people who own land were poor people, were farmers and stuff.
Yeah.
Poor, dirt poor. In fact, most of their properties were taken away by the banks and stuff because they leveraged it, 9 ways that they could. The way to take and it's hard to think this way, but the way for your family to be 2 generations away in that wealthier class is by having something like land today. 2 generations from now, that land that you bought today will put them in a class way above where you're probably at right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how that kind of thing is. If you look at a lot of the people who have inherited, massive amounts of wealth, it's in real estate usually. It's not bank cash money, it's paper wealth, equity on paper wealth essentially. And so it's a weird thing to kind of put into that concept, but far out, the majority of Americans aren't even thinking about buying land. Like they're thinking about buying the studio flat or the beach house or whatever,
Sure.
right?
I agree.
But I think that at some point when that beast is awakened a little bit more, that's when land's a limiting resource is really going to kick in. At some point when whoever it is, one of the big investment funds or whatever says, oh, shit, we should just be buying the shit out of like raw land for the way that this stuff is in.
Don't you think like the federal government would look at
I don't know
the
if they would.
appreciation of that at some point and say like, these guys are making way too much money. We need a bigger cut of this.
I don't know if they would. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's where it's going to, at some point, somebody's going to say, and there are investment groups out there doing it now. In fact, some of these sports guys are getting into it, but there are going to be groups out there that say, why don't we just take this $1 billion fund and go and buy a ton of this land? And if we sit on it for 10 years, it's going to be worth whatever, 20% more than what we have today.
Well, they are. I mean, yeah, that happens. Isn't that Bill Gates is like one of the largest landowners?
I mean, some of the individual guys are, but I think it's when it gets to like almost the Wall Street fund aspect of things that they realize, that's where, because like land's it's an inflation stopper essentially too.
Mm-hmm.
So now
it's less attractive to some people because it's a long term.
It's tangible too. You have to do something.
Well, but that 90% is they don't care. Like they're not going to go use
they don't
the
want
property,
to.
Right? There's a small percentage of people that want to invest and use the land that they have.
And there's responsibilities. I mean, you got to pay taxes on
Right.
stuff. You got to do
Right.
things. So there are things that are
from that standpoint. It's not going to be nearly as quickly growing of an investment as like the stock market has been historically.
no.
Or energy businesses or
Mm-mm.
whatever else, but yeah, it's hard to deny when you're going to use the property too. Like you're in a situation like you and I are of like, how do we invest in
we're in
something
a
that's
unique
stable,
situation.
long-term growth, and that we can use right now, and that we can leverage in the meantime. It makes perfect sense for a percentage of
And
us.
it's a much, much smaller group right now. And it may be for the foreseeable future. That's why I invest in land. Yeah, it's a great investment. It's tangible. I can go use it right now and enjoy it right now in my current life. I can't do that with my stock market.
Sure.
And obviously not saying that the stock market isn't any good, but
Yeah.
it's diversification of that. But to me, it's a asset that I can enjoy right now.
Well, dude, truthfully, like I have money in the stock market right now.
As do I.
And when the time comes for us to buy a piece of property in Illinois, I likely will take some money out of it, knowing that or assuming that it won't make as much money as quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I had contributions in one of my market funds that I took out, and that was my down payment for my first property in Kentucky. Now I'm leveraging properties more than anything, but yeah, I mean, you got to start somewhere, right? The hardest part, like we said, obviously responsibility for a monthly mortgage is important. For most people, it's coming up with that 20%. That's a substantial number.
Yeah.
You know, like even I know Ben stroked that check for, you know, he said his year on that property. I mean, I don't know what that is. Could have been 25 grand, could have been 50 grand. Mm-hmm. But when you have to put 100 grand down on a property and then next month start making monthly payments on it too, that's the shakeout that really,
I mean, those are the two things to consider.
Sits you to a core.
Your down payment and your monthly payments.
Once you get past that, once you get a rhythm to know how to cash flow it, it's not that hard to buy land and afford land. It's that initial payment and then knowing you've got to keep making monthlies on it as well as all of the rest of your life. That's the part that scares the shit out of most people.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of people probably, and it's not good right now because of interest rates, but could be using home equity lines of credit and things like that, because cash out a bank to do that is scary. I've been there.
Dude, start a business. That's probably that's the best advice you can probably ever give anybody. It's risky. Not very many people succeed, but I mean,
well, side gig it, man. I mean, that's what I think. That's how I started all my businesses, right? I had a full-time job, and then I side gig these businesses to the point where I could see. And I mean, dude,
a business that so still start a business.
It took years off of my life. I mean, the amount of hours of, you know, normal day, family, back on from 9 to 3 a.m., up at 6. Like, I mean, years off of my life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Still is, right?
Still
we're still to this day, we're grinding.
You see this gray? That's not just, it's there.
It's pretty good.
But that said.
Got your teeth still.
Yeah, that's true. It allows the freedom to do what I do, invest how I invest, use properties, fund property, cash flow properties with businesses. I mean, it unlocks an entire, but don't think that it makes me really scared when I hear people say, well, I'm starting a business. It's like, cool, what do you do right now? Well, no, I'm just going to start this business. Like, did you have to survive?
Oh, yeah.
We talk about that in the real estate side. Like, transparently, it takes a while for you to make money in the real estate business.
Yeah.
We're still getting the buckets full.
Yeah.
Right? If
Absolutely.
we didn't have cash flow coming in, we'd be in trouble.
Yeah, and I think the main premise behind my statement of like start a business is like, the minute that you realize profits are better than salaries, right? Is like that's what allows the freedom, not just from a cash flow standpoint, but like to be able to take a loan against your own business, to be able to have the freedom to certainly all aspects of to be able to manipulate your own schedule and all of that. But, don't just walk away from consistent income, especially if you have responsibilities, in the case of like a family or something. But start this.
Well, and I mean, even that, if you are buying land, if Jared Prussia just goes and buys land as Jared Prussia, you don't get near the tax benefits as if Jared Prussia LLC went out and bought it, right? The depreciation, the expense write-offs, all of that.
And that's a different thing. I mean, yes, you should buy properties under an LLC as well for different reasons.
But you got to run it as a business.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it comes down to is second homes, whatever. You got to run it as a business, because if you do it just you personally, you're at too much liability risk, first off. But other than that, you just don't get the benefits tax-wise that you're going to get. We're also going to talk, I'll probably have it next week, but Madison will talk about it. He finished the timber tax basis last night. Will apply a value. So he calculated the board feet from a timber tax. We'll apply a value based on the bid we accept. That's how we'll end up getting our final tax basis. But I mean, keep in mind that the money that I'm receiving from this timber cut is tax-free.
Cool. Just because we're rambling here, we need to have a real estate attorney on at some point.
That would be awesome.
To talk about LLC structure.
Yes.
And like, all these tax benefits you're talking about, like, especially if we can find one that is knowledgeable on the tax portion. Like
yes. Because I'm not.
Yep. I think I know a couple, but I don't know, maybe somebody will hear this and point us in the right direction. Would be great.
Is Seth a real estate attorney? Remember Seth we had on for I Bought a Farm?
I do. He might be.
We'll reach out to him.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, other than that, rain dances starting soon.
Beans in the ground tomorrow.
Oh God! If we get rain, you're listening to this, our beans are in the ground, and hopefully we've had rain. Otherwise, we're just like curled up in a ball somewhere.
We should be good.
Yeah, it looks.
Summer's about to restart here.
It looks good
in a good way.
So beans in the ground, velvet growing.
Hopefully a tooth.
A tooth would be.
Get my tooth back.
Would be great. Timber starting to coming in, and then if you're listening to this, it's late. A couple more weeks, we've got our national meeting for Whitetail Properties in St. Louis. So we'll be out there, and then Jared and I are going to do some scouting out there too. But
we're talking Kansas. We're talking Missouri. We're talking missionary.
Missionary. Yeah, so it'll be good. I'm excited to at least start to get out of this funk and into, velvet season and farms and hunting again.
Yeah. Dude, last remark to maybe anybody that was here for Total Archery Challenge. I was there very briefly. That was this past Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday.
And we ran up at 8 a.m. and it was like, so if you listen to the podcast, Margie and I own a business, and I got a power loss notification at 8 a.m.
on Sunday, yeah.
Which is bad because,
you're pretty far at that point. I mean,
I was about an
hour,
hour, 15 minutes.
Oh, really? I thought it was further.
It's closer,
than that.
yeah, fortunately. And so a power loss is bad news for us. We start losing product.
Can't
and
make
stuff.
the cream.
And so I had to, I was like, okay, seems like it's getting solved. We had like the power company on the phone and stuff. And like ultimately I had to run off the mountain like halfway through the course. Ran down off of Seven Springs, got my truck and bolted to that business. And
yeah, that sucks.
Fortunately, and I'm glad I went. I don't think we could have resolved it without that. But I saw some people like glances as I was running out. I was like, I really wanted to stick around and chat with people, but I had to go. So sorry about that.
You also were on East Meets West podcast recently.
Oh yeah,
I started listening to it the other day with Bo.
Yeah.
So if people haven't listened to that, that's probably a good one.
The rat stash.
Yeah. Bo's got a great stash.
He does.
Yeah.
He does.
Just rocking it. Was he at Total Archery Challenge?
I'm sure he was. He told me he would be. So yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure he was there.
And Belinda? You didn't see Belinda?
I think
either.
Jake was there too. Again, we were there early, so people might not have been set up in their booths yet. But when I ran out, I was to the truck. And I had to go.
Crazy. That's how it goes.
Next time. We'll get you next time.
So much is our life anymore of just like run and run.
So in the same
run.
breath of start a business, expect that.
Expect the unexpected. So, anyways, we appreciate Ben coming on this week for our podcast, 132, and we'll see you next week.
Later.
Take me